another episode of get closer to the King. You're tuned in to another episode of get closer to the King. You're tuned in to another episode of get closer to the King. Get closer. Welcome, y'all. Today I have a very special guest with me, Brother Chad Riley. We met at the Skyfall conference, and he's an amazing brother in the Lord. And I got to watch his documentary, and it's a great documentary. I encourage you guys to watch it. It's on Vimeo. And truths, let me get the title here. It is Skinwalkers and Stranger Things of the Unseen Realm, y'all. And it has this meticulous research that went into this film. There is no fluff, and it's 2.5 hours. I had to take it in increments so I can understand what was going on because it's so awesome. But we're just blessed to have him, and welcome, Chad. How are you doing, brother?
Doing good. Glad to be here.
Good, man. Good to have you on. And yeah, I wanted to share real quick. Let me get I'm going to share screen real quick here and show you all. Let's see. This is the Vimeo site and Skinwalkers and Stranger Things of the Unseen Realm. His YouTube channel, which has a lot of amazing research on it as well, is Truth Seekers Research here. And there is just a lot of good stuff on here and some speaking engagements he was at. And yeah, if you don't know about Chad Riley and the research that he's done into the enemy's plans and the lies of history, you're in for a treat. And if you have, you know how good it is. And he's always got new stuff that he's doing that the Lord has him doing. And so we're just blessed to have him on here. And we're supposed to have Gary on. Maybe he'll pop in. We don't know. But yeah, it's so good to have you here, brother. And if you could just give us like a little rundown of how you got into researching this stuff, and then how did you come out with your first documentary that's so intensive and extensive?
Yeah, I came back to the Lord in 2013. Um, was learning, I was already looking at a lot of stuff like 9/11, um, school shootings, different things that were going on out there, and realizing that the world just wasn't exactly what I thought it was, and that they were pulling the wool over everybody's eyes. And the more I dug into stuff, just kept going down different trails, and eventually it led me to a guy by the name of Trey Smith. And I stumbled onto his Nephilim video, and after I watched that and Enoch, I was actually pissed at first. I was like, how come the church never talked about any of this stuff? I never heard any of this kind of stuff growing up. It's like I used to read about the Greek gods and Mount Olympus and things of that nature. And it's like I'd never heard anything about these fallen angels and giants. And so I dug in pretty hard, and that's when I came back to the Lord. And um yeah, I came back with a vengeance this time because I felt kind of upset that the enemy had pulled the wool over my eyes to such a degree that I figured I was going to do anything and everything to expose him. So I just dug in, started learning a lot of this stuff, and the more that I kept unraveling and learning, I saw how a lot of this is all completely interconnected. And when I say that, I mean that with everything. the whole thing about the film that I did, the main thing that I was really researching and looking into was the hitchhiker phenomenon. I found that that was something that kind of encompassed everything. And that led me into remote viewing, which led me into UFO and alien abductions or even encounters. And I saw that all of them, including these charged areas like Skinwalker Ranch and Bradshaw Ranch and Blind Frog and even Stardust and Moonshadow, how all these different ranches, they have these portals and all these bizarre things going on out there, but they are all completely interconnected because of this hitchhiker phenomenon.
Wow.
And that it's completely demonic. It spreads like a virus, just like demons. And that, yeah, you never know what you're going to get. And like I said, we learned through Joe Jordan's research that, these things flee in the name of Jesus. And, it's repeatable. It doesn't matter if it's sleep paralysis or people that have engaged in occult and esoteric things that have stirred up, kicked the hornet's nest and stirred all this stuff up, or people that have just always been dealing with abductions or things coming into their home that they have no control over. It's like you don't have to be a slave to this. You can be free, and all you have to do is cry out in the name of Jesus. And if you accept Jesus as your Lord and Savior, they not only stop, but they stop permanently. So.
Amen. Amen, brother. Yeah. Can you elaborate on that hitchhiker phenomenon that you've researched into and kind of explain how that works?
Yeah, the hitchhiker phenomenon came about from people that were going out to this ranch called Skinwalker Ranch. That's what we all know it as today. But before then, it was owned by an elderly couple that they um, they got elderly. One had passed away. The husband had passed away, and the wife was in a nursing home. And then her brother ended up getting the property after she passed away, so he sold it to the Shermans, and that was in the early to mid 90s. And then the Shermans lived there for about eight.
Oh, it froze. Hopefully we get you back. It froze, brother. Yeah, he froze. We'll see if he comes back. But yeah, I'm just so glad to have Chad on, and he's got a wealth of research and understanding. And I love how he um came back to the Lord and was upset. Was like, how come nobody told me this? How come the church ain't telling you the truth? How come you're not learning the truth? How come you're not learning about the book of Enoch, in churches? How come they didn't tell me about this stuff and how real it is? The spirit world, right? And yeah, I'm just so blessed to have him on. I hope we get him back on here. And in the meantime, you guys go to YouTube and check it out. Let me see. Truth Seekers, Truth Seekers Research, and then his documentary, Skinwalker and Stranger Things of the Unseen Realm on Vimeo. And I mean, you will not be disappointed. It goes into Stranger Things of how that was a real CIA project. And yeah, we'll see if we can't get him back on here. We're back. We got him back. Yeah, he just had some technical difficulties. The internet and somebody doesn't want you guys hearing this information. So we were on the hitchhiker effect, and you were talking about where it started, like it where it started in the sense of like mainstream happening of people knowing about it in Skinwalker Ranch and the people who originally owned it.
Yeah, the what was that? I was talking about the Shermans who had owned the ranch. They lived there for about 18 months, and while they were there for the 18 months, that's when their whole paradigm of what reality is and things going on in this reality just completely was obliterated. Um, Started noticing these gigantic wolves on the property that were almost as tall as a person. I mean, these were no little tiny canines. They were pretty big, and one of them actually attacked one of his baby bulls, and he shot at it point blank range. His son was shooting at it, and it had no effect on this wolf whatsoever. In fact, it's still one of the shots that he fired at close range took a big chunk off of the wolf, and it still just turned and walked away like nothing. Didn't even phase it. And these things would appear and disappear at will. They would follow the tracks and walk down to a riverbank and just completely disappeared. They started seeing portals opening and closing, things flying in and out of these portals, cryptids walking out of some of these portals. And the wife, she talked about a lot of almost like poltergeist activity going on in the home, and they referred to it as the trickster because she would go and buy groceries, come home, and she would set them down on the kitchen counter and take them all out of the bags and put them away. And then, like in the movie Ghostbusters, she would come back into the room like a minute or two later, and all the groceries would be right back in the bag, like she hadn't even touched them. And so, just all sorts of bizarre things going on. Would hide her brush, to do her hair in the microwave and things in the freezer. And it was constantly, you'd hear footsteps, people walking around in the house and nobody would be there. And after, there was the time that four of the biggest bulls that he had were all put into a pen and that they were literally stacked in this pen and no way, it's like you could never get four bulls to get in a tiny area like this. And it wasn't until they found that the bulls were in there and had said something when they were right there in front of the bulls that the bulls, it's almost like they were in a trance. And as soon as they heard a voice, they came out of it and they, literally started kicking the trailer apart that they were in and finally, broke the door down and got out. But
Wow.
just it's just all sorts of crazy stuff that and then finally what broke the camel's back was he had these three dogs that were like his children to him.
Yeah.
And one night a blue orb appeared out on the pasture and started getting closer to the house, and his dogs took notice of this blue orb flying around and they took off after it, and it was almost like it was baiting them to follow it into the tree line. And it kept getting down low and they would lunge at it and then it would go up high again and start flying away into the tree line until eventually it drew all three dogs into the tree line behind the trees. And once they got behind the tree line, then he heard three loud yelps, and that was it. And this was probably like around 2 or 3 in the morning, so he just decided to go inside and go to sleep, and he'd go check on his dogs when he got up in the morning. And whenever he got up the next morning and went out there, he said he found three greasy stains in the ground where it looked like something had pressed down into the ground. And these three circles was all that was, these three greasy spots that were pressed down into the ground was all that was left of his dogs. So after that, he decided he no longer wanted to be there. There was other crazy story. Well, another one was when somebody had started writing about what was going on out there in the local newspaper, and this gentleman had shown up out of the blue and said he wanted to go out into the property and pray or meditate. And so they kept telling him, this isn't a tourist attraction, it's like we're not doing all that. And the guy was like, please, please, I just need to go pray or meditate. So they finally relented and let him go out there, and he sat down, I think, over there close to Homestead too. And all of a sudden, while he was sitting there with the yoga pose, doing his hands up like this or whatever he was doing, he kept hearing a bell, like a cowbell ringing. And that was the thing, is none of Terry's cows or bulls, none of them had bells on, so he didn't know what this noise was or where it was coming from. And then he said all of a sudden in the tree line, he saw something running from tree to tree. He said it looked like a blur. And he didn't really have the vocabulary to say what he was seeing. He just said it looked like a heat mirage or a blur or something. And finally, he said that this thing broke from the tree line and ran towards the man. And he said that it ran right up over him and stopped and just literally right over him, just let out this loud roar. He said it was like almost like a bear and a lion, but it was the loudest thing he'd ever heard. And this guy went from a sitting position to 6 feet up in the air, flying backwards. And whenever Terry and his son ran over to the guy, this thing, whatever it was, it started running away back towards the tree line. And um, they ran over to check on him, make sure he was okay, but he was so scared and so petrified he wouldn't let go of Terry. And Terry finally told him, he said, "If you don't let go of me," he said, "I'm gonna hit you." And he's like, "I'll let go of you," but he's like, "You got to get me off this property." He said, "This land is cursed." He said, "You are dealing with the devil." And so it wasn't till probably a couple of months later they were watching this movie called Predator with Arnold Schwarzenegger and Jesse Ventura. And when they saw the creature walking through the jungle camouflaged, at that exact same moment, they both pointed at the screen and they were like, "That's it. That's what we saw."
Yeah, like
And
the
so,
Mirage kind of deal. Yeah.
so
Wow.
whatever this thing was, it had the ability to camouflage itself and blend in. So that was the first time they had encountered what they called or referred to as the predator creature out there. But there was several occasions where they ran into something like that, and even Bradshaw Ranch has a history of something like that appearing out there on it as well.
Wow. So did that guy, well, I don't know if anybody's still in touch with that guy, but like that hitchhiker phenomenon, if you're not a believer and you're not savvy to the spiritual warfare that's going on, these things attach to you and go with you. Like you take
Oh
stuff
yeah.
home, right? That's like the hitchhiker.
Well, that was the thing is after the Bradshaws left, Bigelow showed up before they left. He went out there with John Alexander, who was an army general who used to do things with the army going down to Peru and places in South America and dealing with what they called shaman. And they were learning techniques to incorporate into the remote viewing program. And they already had what they called psychic spies, but they were wanting to branch out and create what they were now calling psychic assassins. So John Alexander went to the location with Robert Bigelow and was there when he purchased that ranch. But that's just one of the ranches that he purchased. He not only purchased Skinwalker Ranch, which everybody knows about, he also purchased Bradshaw Ranch, and he owned both of them for a decade. And they not only had CIA people working out there, but they had NIDS, Bass, and all that. And like I said, when you look at the NIDS team, it's the who's who of everything. So you got Hal Puthoff, who was the head of the remote viewing program, along with Ingo Swann. And that's another one of those interesting facets when you find out that Hal Puthoff and Ingo Swann were both OT7s out of Scientology. And that's where they learned their techniques for remote viewing, that they were teaching the Army and INSCOM and all of them how to do remote viewing. In fact, what is it? Lou Elizondo, that was one of the things that they taught him was how to remote view. And when he started doing it, he said that he started having orbs flying around in his house. But one of the individuals that ended up going out there and working on Bigelow's ranch out there at Skinwalker was a gentleman by the name of Axelrod in the books. If you read Hunt for the Skinwalkers and stuff like that, and Skinwalkers at the Pentagon, there's a character in there by the name of Axelrod. And Axelrod it's now come out who Axelrod was. It was Jay Stratton, who's naval intelligence. And I mean, he's not a Johnny come lately. He's the head guy over all the UAP stuff that has been going on in the United States within the last couple of years when he
Wow.
exited the program. So he knows all the secrets, he knows everything. But this guy was working out there as part of NIDS for Bigelow at the same time when all this was going on. After going out there and spending a little time on the ranch, something followed him home. He actually got deployed overseas, and while he was overseas, after being out at the ranch, his wife had an encounter one day. She was walking around the back of the house where the black glass sliding door was, and she happened to look outside and she saw what she described as an 8 foot tall wolf standing on its hind legs, leaned up against the tree with its arms crossed, just staring there, just glaring at her.
Whoa.
And she was just like, kind of taken aback. She didn't know what to think or what to say or what, but she just kind of sat there and stared at this thing. And after a couple of minutes, it just turned around and walked away on two legs. And she was freaked out, but she didn't know what to think or say about it. So she didn't say anything. And a couple of days later, her two boys were, one was laying on the couch, the other one was going into the kitchen for something, and he just happened to look outside and he saw something out in the yard, and he just, oh, and the other one was like, what is it? Jumped up off the couch, runs over, and he looks out the back door, and they're both just staring at this thing. It's this 8 foot tall wolf just leaned up against the tree, just staring at them. And they're both looking at one another, looking at this thing, and it's just sitting there staring at them. And after a couple of minutes, again, this time it took off running, but it was kicking up leaves, and they're both just kind of like, "What was that?" And they're like, "I don't know." And so they didn't say anything to. I mean, they talked to their mom about it, but they didn't say anything to their friends or anything like that. And then their friends started telling them they were seeing weird things like cryptids or shadow people, and seeing like orbs and things like that around their homes. And come to find out that this, whatever this was, it was spreading out through the neighborhood to their friends and family members. And even Axelrod, his job that he worked at, his one of his coworkers, it infected one of his coworkers. And his coworker was having poltergeist activity taking place in their home to such a degree that her roommate moved out because she couldn't deal with it anymore.
Wow. Yeah, so just it's setting up shop and infestation of manifestations all over the place. And I noticed, I know when you astral project or you do these things, whether you do it with drugs or whatever, you leave breadcrumbs back to your address here. And those things know you, that like you're opening up doors that you cannot close in your life. And the only way you can close them is coming to Jesus and having a real relationship with him. Because that's the other thing too, right? I mean, we see it in the Bible where people use the name of Jesus, but they don't have the internal reality of him being their king, of being their Lord or their master of their life. And the demons turn around and say, "Hey, I know Paul, I know Jesus. Who the heck are you?" And they kick their butt and they tear them up. So, I mean, yeah, it's just it's crazy, the just the reality of it all, right? And how do people know that these things, what gets me, man, is like, how do you know that these things are real or have experiences like this and don't think that God is not real, you know? I just don't, doesn't compute for me.
Well, that's the crazy thing about it, because everybody's like, we live in this three-dimensional reality. This is what we know, and it's like, but when you read the Bible, it's like it shows that we live in a supernatural. It's like you got talking donkeys, you got fish, spitting out coins, and people walking on water, raising the dead, coming back from the dead, walking through walls. It's like, how can you think that we live in just a regular natural reality? It's like the Bible tells us it's more than that. It's like, what was it in the verses where it talks about they came to stone Jesus and he walked right through the mist, and almost talks like he disappears just walking right through them. And,
Jehovah Sneaky.
then you got him walking through walls after he resurrected. And that's the thing, is you notice it specifically says that the apostles were in the room with the door
Door
locked, but
shut
yet
and locked, yeah.
locked. It says locked. And then all of a sudden he just comes walking through the walls, and he's like, "Peace be with you," coming in doing these mic drop moments. Boom.
Yeah, he had to say peace right away because they're probably like, "Ah."
Right?
Yeah, but yeah, it just trips me out, man, because well, Jesus, he was constantly trying to tell us about the supernatural. You look at Nicodemus coming to him in the middle of the night, and he's just trying to tell him about the supernatural of this realm. And he's not picking up what he's putting down. And he's like, "Well, if I can't tell you spiritual things about here, how will I ever tell you about spiritual things there?" You know, and the
Right.
yeah,
Yeah, and that's the thing, because he's like, I tell you things about this world and you believe me not. And it's like, he wanted to tell us. He really, I mean, that was him saying, "I want to tell you guys more, but you guys just can't handle it. You can't wrap your little heads around it."
Yeah, so I mean, it just blows me away for people to have these experiences and still not come to grasp with this is the darkest dark. I'm seeing this, experiencing for myself. There's got to be light, there's got to be the way, the truth, the life. Jesus has got to be real. I mean,
Yep.
yeah, it's just nuts, bro. That's nuts. But yeah, all that astral projection and what else do they call it? Goodness. Um, and it's the cool thing is what you learn, and from Chad's research, it's all in the government. It all goes back to the satanic cults and Luciferians of the highest levels of black government and secret ops and all this stuff. It's all one. It's very much one. That's where we get all of this stuff. And like he has gosh, what is it? Stranger Things. Stranger Things. You talk a little bit about that. How that was actually Project Montauk.
Yeah, the original title for the TV show was Montauk. The Duffer Brothers, that when they wrote the script for that, it was titled Montauk. It was actually Netflix that told them they needed to change the title, and they also were sued by somebody who said that they had plagiarized their short film called Montauk Project. And so after they got sued and Netflix told them to change the name, that's when it became Stranger Things. But it's based on Camp Hero, Montauk, New York, which was a very real facility that was going on back in the early 1980s. Preston Nichols actually wrote a book about all this, and that he tells the whole story about how the government was literally kidnapping children off the street, homeless, runaways, things like that, and they were using trauma-based mind control as well as satanic ritual abuse to open these kids up to these powers. And according to Russ Dizdar and his research called The Black Awakening, he literally summarized it and broke it down to the most easiest way to understand it, that they are shattering the minds of these children in order to open them up to demonic possession, and by opening up them to demonic possession, having demonic powers that they could tap into. And that's what this was all about. So it's like, what you see on the TV show where they go into the upside down and they could go and spy on people and listen to people and hear their conversations. That's what it started out as. Remote viewing started out as gathering information from a distance and psychic spying and things like that. And it quickly started to evolve. They started doing far more things. And in fact, if you look into the whole remote viewing program, there's a movie called Third Eye Spies that will kind of give you a little jump start on learning a little bit about it. But it started out, it was a gentleman by the name of Hal Puthoff, as well as Ingo Swann and goodness, Targ. Oh goodness, I can't think of the Targan something, the third individual. But anyways, these three individuals came together. They were the remote viewing program, and like I said, the techniques that they used there was Ingo Swann and Hal Puthoff had learned when they were in Scientology. This is the thing about Scientology that a lot of people, they just think it's just this crazy cult religious organization, that it's just this cult. And it is to a degree, but the thing about it is that look at who started it. That's what you really need to focus on right off the bat. Who started it? Well, we know that was L. Ron Hubbard. Well, who's L. Ron Hubbard? Well, he worked with Jack Parsons. And oh wow, here we go. We got Gary Wayne coming in.
Hey, we got Gary coming.
So, but yeah, he come in. I think he's just got to turn
He's
his video
connecting.
on. There he is.
Hey, Gary.
Hey, my apologies. I had it on my calendar for 2 o'clock PST. I saw the 2 o'clock on the email. Didn't see the 11 yesterday to 2 and confirmed it. Sorry, I had dropped my dog off at the haircut place, and it's a hour there and an hour back. So I
Oh yeah,
I
no
saw
problem.
chat. I saw Chad's text and I'm going, oh my God, did I screw that up?
Oh, no worries, brother.
Yeah, no worries.
We were
You're there
having
now.
we were having issues, and then we got to talking a little bit, so
Yeah.
we got a really late start anyway. So
Okay.
Yeah.
So anyway, good to see you, Chad.
good to see you
See you,
too, brother.
Isaac. Yeah.
Yeah, good to see you, Gary. Good to have
Yep.
you on. Yeah, we're recording right now, so we might as well just jump
Okay.
into it if you're ready.
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely.
Welcome. We got Gary Wayne. How cool is this? I got Chad Riley and Gary Wayne. I'm just gonna let I planned on just letting you guys go back and forth and me kind of just being in the background. But yeah, Gary Wayne's here. He's author of two amazing books, the Genesis 6 Conspiracy 1 and the Genesis 6 Conspiracy 2. And I love the layout of what you did with the books because you can literally just pick up either one and skip to a section and just learn about
Yes.
that section. And I mean, like you don't have to read it like a normal book, which is really cool.
Yeah, it's helpful, but not necessary. So there'll be things that will may be kind of referenced in the chapter that you're reading that may have come up earlier in the book. And anything that's got to do with the first book, I do a reference on. So if you can always sort of follow through on that. And one of the concepts I thought when I was writing for book one was that this is going to be a really large book. And for some lucky reason, it actually gets published and people may actually want to try and read it. It'd be too long, and I don't want people saying I'm not going to finish the book. So what I did was I laid out each book to be a mini story in each chapter. And so you can read them individually, and information in that first chapter will come up throughout the book. And so I did book two in the same way so that, yeah. And actually, that's how a lot of people read the books is that, they'll start at chapter, let's say 61 or something, and then start bouncing around on topics. And then I think eventually, if there's enough interest, they go back and they read it from start to finish because then they really get sort of all of the information coming up and it starts to connect some more dots. So yeah, really happy with both books and can't believe book one is still selling after 9 years on the market, and it actually sells more books every year. So it continues to resonate with more and more people. And so if people don't know the difference between the two, book two was done not because I wanted to be, but because people kept asking me, what you want is somebody to do research like you did in book one, but we want you to apply all of that talent, so to speak, and effort to going deeper into the Bible than what's been done before. So what I decided when I was convinced I would do it, because I didn't want to be redundant. That's why I didn't want to do another book. But
Sure.
the more contact I had with social media and shows with Christians is that they're starving for more. I give good information, stuff that they haven't seen in book one, but not to the depth that a lot of people wanted to get into. So I look at book two as book one on steroids for Christians. And if you like Dr. Heiser's work, it's Dr. Heiser on steroids. So a lot of the things that I didn't put into book one was how deep you can go with Hebrew and Greek and the etymology and the meanings, because I was wanting to let other sources sort of speak for themselves. So all of that's on display in book two, and all of the footnotes are actually footnotes. They're on the same page so that people can read the paragraph, look down, and there's a lot of information in the footnotes. So believe me, this book goes deeper into prehistory, giants, angels, the angelic order, the rebellious ones, uh, the hybrid giants. I go through each of the campaigns on the Exodus Wars, and also do some more on Genesis 14 with the War Giants, which hasn't been done, and differently in how I do it in book one. And I'm underlining things in there as I go to help people understand end time prophecy, because one of my premises is that to fully understand end time prophecy, you have to understand some of the things that was going on in the days of Noah, both before and after the flood. And that starts to connect into a chronology that I put down for end time prophecy. And I put my approach. It's not a standard approach. It's just my guidelines on how I do my research. And I apply that sort of same research to the prophetic side. And so it's on display. So whether or not people agree with my conclusions or not, they know how I got there. And
Sure.
what I found is it just takes the contradictions out. So anyways, I'm on a long rant here and I'll shorten it up here. So just wanted to announce as well that book 2 came out on audio yesterday. So it's up on
Oh,
Amazon.
sweet.
And so now both are out on audio. And then as I've gotten all of this and the website revisits done, I'll be getting back to doing book 3. So
Nice. Yeah, we're glad to have you on. And that just goes to what you were mentioning earlier about, not learning this stuff in the church and stuff, is that Chad was talking about it in his testimony. It's like, he was kind of pissed off because nobody told him about the book of Enoch. Nobody told him about fallen angels
yeah.
and stuff like this. You don't learn this stuff in church, and it's coming out now for these reasons because the times we're living in. And so you guys are two amazing, brilliant researchers. So I just kind of want to let you guys take over
Yeah.
the show, and I'll just be in the background here.
Well, glad to be working with Chad again. We've known each other for a few years once I got onto social media, and I think our research dovetails quite well. And I love doing shows with Chad. And so he was what a lot of people don't know. He was one of my biggest promoters early on. He and Justin Fall and the people and now UCTV, but you know Chad would post my videos or my posts that I would do everywhere, and he really helped me sort of get moving. And I did a lot of shows with Justin as Chris later worked with Justin as well. And he actually did my first 3 interviews that I did, Justin Fall. And so that's how I got started on doing podcasts, because I'd not done anything like that before. I didn't even know what a podcast was. And just a few months earlier, I realized I have to get on social media to, promote my book. And I didn't know anything about social media. So it was an interesting sort of start.
Yeah, you were one of the first interviews I did was with you. I remember we were, what was it, Now You See TV? They
Yeah.
called me in at last second if I'd come on there and talk to you about the pygmy people and things like that. And
Yeah.
next thing I know, it's like I'd already agreed to Kay that I would come on Deception Detection and be her co-host. And
Yeah.
then the very next day that I did my first show with her, she's like, I got a special announcement to make. I got a new co-host. His name's Chad Riley. And you're all, hey, Chad, long time no talk. I was like, yeah, brother.
Yeah, that was interesting. So, and I really liked working with Kay and you on that podcast as well. And I'm not sure how Kay is doing these days. I have not heard from her for a couple of years, but she was really good to work with.
Uh, yeah, Kay passed away.
Oh, I'm
She,
sorry to hear that.
yeah, she came down with COVID and passed away. So,
Okay. Sorry to hear that. So,
well, hopefully she's with the Lord. And so she's not even thinking about us. We're not even an afterthought anymore.
Yeah, and so I don't know if you know about Chad's documentary that he put out. It's over 2.5 hours long, and it's extensive. I mean, there's no filler or fluff in it whatsoever. And I had to take it like in chunks so my brain could process what it was just taking in. But it's brilliant. Yeah.
So, if Chad's done a video that way, I'm going to have to see it, because one of the things that, Chad would go on social media and say about one of the shows I would do is Gary Wayne just unloaded another download of massive information. So it looks like Chad's taken that to make that process to documentaries. So yeah. And then what it does is you want to see it more than once because you want to pick up the details. So it's good to give more information than less, I think.
Yep.
Yeah, I've watched it 3 times already.
There you go.
Did I not send it to you, Gary?
No, you did not. I didn't even know that you were working on that project. So
Well, I'm gonna have to get that to you. That way you can watch it this weekend or something if you want.
absolutely. Yep.
All right. Well, I'll get that sent to you. I'll send you the link as well as a promo code. That way you can watch it for free.
Excellent.
Look
Appreciate
forward
that.
look forward to getting your feedback on it. And I still need to get your second book. I've got your first one. You made it out to me and you sent it to me, so I
Yeah.
just need to get your second one.
Well, send me your address. I'll send you one.
Okay. We'll do
Yep.
that.
Yep. So I think you'll like this book too, because I mean, book one was really interesting with all of the other things I bring in, but it's amazing what's in the Bible, and that's no surprise to you. But I think
I
being
love
a
anything you do,
yeah,
man. You know that, and that's the
yeah,
thing. It's like you're like me. You're thorough, and you come with all the receipts. And
yeah,
that was one of the things, like your book where you got into talking about the gray fairies and things like that, and that really tied in with Jacques Vallée's work, Passport to Magonia. And it's
yeah.
like, yeah. So Gary, he is. People try to say I'm a research guru. No, I ain't got nothing on Gary Wayne. Nothing.
Maybe that's why we hit it off so well. We just love the detail and all of the other things that come with going deeper and exploring more on those types of topics. So
Exactly. Yeah, I was just telling him about the whole remote viewing program that was actually birthed out of Scientology. That
yeah,
the two head guys that did the remote viewing program where we're teaching people in INSCOM and all that was Hal Puthoff as well as Ingo Swann, and they were both OT7s. And I was telling him, I was like, I said, that's one of the things that most people don't know about Scientology. They think it's just a crazy cult, but
yeah,
they believe that they will become their own gods. They believe
yeah.
that they will be like Ubermen, like the X-Men. And so you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, this is a Masonic group. I mean, let's be honest about it. So it's an extension of Gnosticism and secret societies. And all they're doing is graphically taking to literature and screen these topics. And then they teach secret knowledge as part of that sort of religion. So, I mean, it has all sort of the displays of what the polytheists believe, but they're just more direct. And so they are full proponents of giants originally being the superior race on the earth and that bank of knowledge that they once possessed, and that these individuals are coming back. So they play a large role in some of the sort of theology, so to speak, behind the ancient alien mythos, but it comes out of that same sort of genre. And so anything that they sort of produce, if I know that they've produced it, I'll watch it just because I want to know some of the things that they think is important at this point in time to get out there. And so it's a very interesting group. There's so many people in Hollywood that is part of it. And Hollywood is one of their great sort of venues for promoting their ideology. But once they got their hooks into you, I mean, they're a vicious cult. I mean, they don't take well to people leaving or not supporting their cause. So they uh, they are extraordinary on bloodlines as well. Um, it's more important than what you're first led to believe when you get involved with it. But again, the people that they're inviting are people with bloodlines. The
Yeah.
people that get famous and get their weight behind them have bloodlines. And they also extract a significant amount of tribute out of the people that they promote. But again, that's typical infrastructure of the secret societies, that if you want to have fame, that comes with a price. So you have to have a tribute that you're going to be doing, and then it comes with other things that they're going to ask as they go along, and they'll take you up that ladder of fame, but you have to continue to play ball. So it's a microcosm of the adversarial forces um, that we're playing against, and they look at themselves as part of the visible hierarchy, that represents the invisible ones, the council of the gods. So, and they're preparing the world and preparing, I would say, false prophets as part of one of the sources likely for end time false prophets, for people to go out into the world at a certain time to predict, apocalyptic things to try and bring about world government. So now in this, they don't really see a role for humans. And that's again to the core of that sort of doctrine. So they kind of envision that sort of phoenix coming out of the ashes allegory within the secret societies, or the Shiva understanding of the destroyer god that destroys the earth by fire and then recreates. And they see themselves as the phoenix flying out of the ashes to restart this new age and this new world that the gods of the apocalypse are going to bring about.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that I really hit on in there because of Helena Blavatsky's research in the Secret Doctrine Volume 2. You know, she did the Book of Dizion as a section in there, and she actually gets it. And that's the thing. It's like a lot of people, they don't really fully understand. They think that the Nazis were all about white supremacy and eugenics and things like that, but that's not what it was completely about. You know, that was part of it, but the main thing that you really need to comprehend and wrap your head around is they were trying to get back to the whole root race theology. It was that the
Yes.
Aryans were descendants of the Atlanteans, and what she
Yes.
wrote about in the Atlanteans in the Book of Dizion, she said that she translated the section where it talked about they built statues the height of their bodies, which was 9 yardis high. Well, a yardie is like a measurement of 3 feet or a yard, and that would make them 27 feet tall, which directly ties them into Genesis 6. That's what they were tying or trying to tap into, was the 13 royal bloodlines, the Nephilim bloodlines. That's what they were after.
Yeah, the new man concept was to bring about through forward genetics until they had better technology to bring it about with DNA manipulation and things like that. The giants again, and in this case, the blonde-haired, blue-eyed, pale-skinned Aryans, or as in their ideology, they either Thule or Tula, depending on how you want to pronounce that, is the same as Atlantis, which I think it is, or it's another civilization, but I think it fits perfectly into the Atlantean accounts in other areas coming out of theosophy, like Blavatsky. And so they called their religion that they established as an official religion in 1933 with the Rice Church, they called it Ariosophy, with that Aryan overlay. And Hans Horberger was one of their main sort of historical theological pillars, who brought in it that they believed that the Germans were a race that were once giants that have devolved through intermarriage and corruption with humans down to the size and the looks that they are. So they're trying to create that new Atlantis, which is again consistent with polytheism and Gnosticism, and after the spirit of um, of Francis Bacon, who wrote The New Atlantis, about this end time polytheist religion in this new age. And of course, Atlantis had the 10 kings. So it fits well in as you start to connect that into end time prophecy for what they're trying to bring about. And the Reich was 1,000-year reign, with the Fuhrer being an antichrist type figure. And so they saw a greater uh, mission that they were trying to do, and they would not have stopped with just creating genocide or Holocaust against the Jewish people. They were going to eliminate all the people that they thought were inferior, and they were going to try and conquer the world, just as the Atlanteans tried to do, and just as Antichrist will want to do. And I think it's probably the largest chapter I do in book one is on the Nazis, that it was so important as an analogy for the end time, as an Antichrist wannabe scenario with Hitler and the Nazis, and it's National Socialism. So just project that to the end time, that I like to call, National Socialism on a globalist scale. So they want to separate themselves from nationalism, but they want to put the same thing they were doing in Nazi Germany into world government. So it's going to be one of those analytical things that we can look to as a more recent piece of history as to what we can expect for the end time.
Yeah, I find it also fascinating that we had a something similar that happened here in the Americas. You were talking about the large blonde-haired, blue-eyed
Yeah,
people. Well, then we got Quetzalcoatl, we got Kukulkan,
yeah,
Viracocha, and they all talk about these beings that came across the sea from like this Atlantis or Tower of Babel scenario, and
yeah,
that they were bringing knowledge from across the sea. And you get into like Zeluha and the seven giants and how they were building all the pyramids down in Mexico, and that the gods went to war with Zaluha and struck him
Yep.
down. I mean, it's fascinating just how much of that, and that's the thing, you get into the whole thing about Amaruka. You
Yep.
got the plumed or feathered serpent going on here in the United States, but the fact that they were all worshiping the same deity and
Yep.
they all described it the same. This is going to be part of the research that I'm going to get into in my next film, where I'm going to get into the nine. And I'm going to talk about the nine gods that ruled over every pantheon, every civilization. They may have had different names depending
Yep.
upon that time of that civilization and so on, but they were always the same nine. And these are the nine that ruled over the what Dr. Heiser talks about in the unseen realm, the council of the 70 gods that ruled over the nations that had been corrupted, and there was nine that ruled over the 70. And that was the thing. It's
Yep.
that's why God said, you shall die
Yep.
like men.
Yeah. It's interesting whether it's 9 or it's 7, because it used to be the constant of nations before before the flood was 4, then it moved to 7, then it moved to 9, mostly with 9 with the Game of Thrones and some other research as that sort of hit our consciousness. So it'll be interesting to see, to learn eventually which one it is. Is it 9 or is it 7? And I'm fine with either. 7 has a more interesting sort of connection to the Council of the Gods, because when you look at Enoch, if you were to factor that in, you have the chiefs of tens, right? So if you have 7 major gods, and this is just doing some math, then you'd have 70 nations. That is the 70 nations both before and after the flood, that's ruled by, the sons of Israel. And what's interesting about the sons of Israel is, as I cover this off in more detail in book 2, is that is from what I call an interesting dual prophecy. And I did this in some of my posts, but I explain a dual prophecy and show examples in book 2. Dual prophecy is like Isaiah 14 is another one, Ezekiel 28. It has interesting prehistory information in it that's important to understand what happened in the past, happened after the flood, what's going on today, and what's going to happen in connections to the end time. It will have prophecies for the time of the prophet, in this case, Moses, as they're about to take their land, which isn't listed as one of the 70 nations in the table of nations. And then you have Israel that comes into play. And so different translations won't say Israel in Deuteronomy 32:8. It will say, when you factor in the Aramaic translations of the Dead Sea Scrolls and the Septuagint, it's going to say sons of God, or it's going to say angels. And so people will use this and say, well, the Bible, Christians can't even get their act together as to the meaning of that. And it's all correct. It's just misunderstood. So Jacob receives that title of Israel, and because he wrestled with God, but that's not the meaning of the word. And the word is older than the tribes of Israel, just as it's being talked about in the nations that would include the 70 patriarchs in Genesis 10. And they're numbered by the sons of Jacob that were born in Egypt as well, which is, Exodus 1:5, which is the same number 70 as the 70 in the table of nations. And so if you look at that Hebrew there, it is Ben Israel, as we would sort of conflate it, but Israel is a compound word. So it's really Ben Sarah El. And so if you get into a concordance that has connections to the source words, it breaks it down into 2 words as a compound word. So it's a title as well. So it means Sarah, meaning ruling or prince, and El, obviously a god. So in this case, it's the sons of the ruling God. And I would say God Most High, just so that people aren't confused with where I'm going with. So these are sons of God. These are angels. And it's also prophetic, I think, for the 70 sons of Israel, Jacob, that will be the leaders of the nations as they're accounted for in the millennium. And you also have a connection there back to Adam. And so the inferences are 70 sons of Adam and nations of Adam before the flood as a constant. That would
But
be,
keep in mind there was one that was blotted out too. You get into Jeconiah.
yep, yep. There's that possibility, but sticking with the numbers that they're presenting here and what we have to work with, right? In terms of how things are counted. So we don't have the sons listed for Adam, but what we do know is there's this consistency to that prophecy. And so it's important to understand all of that. And what's important about that is that, these are the survivors on the ark as it comes down through Noah, which makes that perfect continuation. So, but yeah, so people should understand Israel in that application as the compound word and as a double entendre for Jacob as well. But Jacob is mentioned separately, so you know the specific inference for his future prophecy.
Yeah, the thing about the Council of Nine, um, you know about Pure Rich and the research that he was doing with Lab Nine as well as the Round Table and all that. They were contacting these entities that refer to themselves as the Nine.
Yep,
And so that's what kind of like got me looking into a lot of this stuff. But like I said, the
yep,
more you look at it, it's like there was nine gods that ruled over Mount Olympus,
yep,
the Ennead and Egypt and so on. It's like you just
yep.
keep seeing these nine all around the world throughout, going all the way back into
It is.
prehistory.
It is. And again, there's that contradiction in polytheism that you see nine, as in nine mountains and nine main gods, and you also see it represented as seven mountains and seven gods. So depending on which one you want to look at from a polytheist perspective, and again, I'm fine with either, but it'll be interesting as more information comes out, and hopefully your research will shine a little bit better light on is what is that original nine? And is that different than the seven wandering stars that we would get in the New Testament? And those seven wandering stars are kind of a mix of parent gods and offspring gods in different cultures, and also as they sort of get represented in the days of the week, but they're all allegories for the original hierarchy. And so when you understand in Freemasonry, for example, they'll look at Osiris, Isis, and Horus as their holy trinity, but these are offspring gods versus parent gods who ruled before the flood. And they clearly say that Isis and Horus and Osiris are allegories for the higher gods. So there's a chain of allegory that goes back through the parent gods. And typically, parent gods have a number of 12, which is different than 7 and 9. But these 9 or 7, depending on which one it is, Satan would be considered as one of those. So sometimes how they get to the 9 is Satan is the chief god, just as he would sit over the council of the gods, and his consort would be the other one, because all of the angels in dualism had a consort. And that this is understood from the Freemasons. I think you can make a case through the Bible, but I'm trying to be careful with it, is that Leviathan is also an allegory for Satan, just as Leviathan is going to be dealt as the male and destroyed in the end time. The female is destroyed sometime in prehistory, and it's recorded in all cultures around the world, whether or not it's Baal and Marduk or Indra killing this Leviathan type creature with Verta or Lotan or Yam or the 1,000 different names all around the world. And that story is also recorded in the Central American accounts as well, with a couple of names for the Leviathan characters that I don't want to try and pronounce without putting the name in front of me. But I've listed their names in book 1. Um, so again, that's why I don't take 9 off the table, because of that additional detail of Satan and his consort.
But
And
and what you were just talking
but
about there, you were talking about the about Satan and Lucifer and all that. That was what Aleister Crowley had said. Remember, he said in one of his books, that the biography, he had made the statement, "I serve my God Lucifer and his Augustus Council of Nine."
yeah,
So that was the thing. It's like he named all nine of them, and
yep.
Lucifer being the top.
Yeah.
So
Again, you get some of that consistency in there. So, and if it wasn't important to them, it wouldn't be out there.
no.
So it's a matter of how you sort of understand it. And so I used to think it was a contradiction, but I lean, but because we don't get 9 listed in the Bible, I try not to get too doctrinal on it, that if you want to get to 9, here's how I get there. And saying Satan has a consort um, is sort of radical enough, but it's the standard sort of organizational structure with the patriarchal god and the matriarchal goddess, right? It's just part of the whole system that comes down. So why wouldn't he have? What's also interesting in Daniel 11, Antichrist is going to worship the god of forces. And so the Hebrew there is Eloah Maus, and Eloah is the AH female suffix to Elohim, and or El. So both there. And so, but it's a female plural. Typically when you have an AH, when it applies to God, because Eloah is used for God's action or application of might in the Old Testament, it's not understood as a female, but you could get an understanding of a female from that. So for example, if you have Gibborim, that's the male plural, Gibborah, meaning the same thing, is the female plural. So you could apply that to might being applied, or to a female giant or mighty one, just as you would have Chakam and Chakma for wisdom.
And we know that there was female giants because the footprints out there in Africa, the one that they refer to as the footprint of Goliath, they've
Yeah.
actually came out and done molds of that, and they said that that was a female footprint.
Yeah, well, we even get a couple of them listed in the Bible with Timnah and Oholibamah, who married Esau and Eliphaz, and produced hybrid uh, dynastic peoples with that. And Timnah is the daughter of Seir, a Horim, and Oholibamah, although I don't recall seeing who her uh, parent was, is also a Horim giant, female. So we have two, and they were used to create new dynasties.
And there's something about Esau I still can't quite put my finger on, not just
Yeah, I
about him
know.
being red and hairy, but it's like, was he a giant, a little bit of a giant himself? What's the deal there? What's going on? And then the whole
Well,
thing in the book of Jasher talking about him with the skin that
yeah.
supposedly belonged to Adam, that God clothed Adam with after he realized that they had fell. So, I mean, there's just so much to that.
He certainly was more comfortable with the giants, and he lived amongst the giants. He's described as ruddy and hairy like the giants, as you were mentioning, and he intermarried with the giants, he acted like the giants. So if he wasn't, he was certainly a wannabe, and he's kind of maybe more like Nimrod in that sort of respect, because Nimrod becomes a Gibborim, Chalal, which is done, as you take that back to the Hebrew, it means more of um, doing it through rituals and sexual rituals, and breaking your bond and your covenant with God. And all of that seems to apply with Esau. And that word is also used in Genesis 6 when humans began to multiply on the earth. The word began is the same word. And these are the daughters that are going to intermarry with the giants. Again, with the same connotations that are sort of taking place there. So he may have been more of one that became like a giant, as did, Eliphaz, and certainly, Amalek is a complete hybrid, Horim giant and human. So, and if Nimrod intermarried with giants, then, and I think that's what the polytheists certainly make the claim, and he started dynastic bloodlines. So he either married a fallen angel female, or a female giant, and started some of the bloodlines. And you have giants that detail, that we get listed in the Bible in book 2. First one is the Elamites, which he definitely married amongst, and the Elamites are two different groups of people as they're described as by historians like Smith. And so it seems like the Shemites who are going to take the name Elam intermarry with another Aboriginal group. And that's, as you take that back in their belief system, and biblically, the etymology of that is Elam comes from Olam, or is equivalent with Olam, which is basically meaning as ancient. These are the ancient Aboriginals. So I think these are the Elamim. And then you have the Kenizzites, the Kenim, and the Cadmonim in the triple K that's listed in Genesis 15 as part of the land that is occupied by the giants that include, the Mighty Seven and the Rephaim giants as well. But these I take all back to giants as well, and particularly the Cadmonim as being the people of the East, as you take that meaning back. And they're actually listed in the original Semitic and the Ugaritic text, like QDM for Cadmonim, for example.
Okay, we're getting off into the weird and bizarre, and you brought up Nimrod. Do you believe that Nebuchadnezzar may have been the first werewolf mentioned in the Bible? And what I mean by that is when it talks about how his hair grew like eagle's feathers,
Yeah, I know what
his
you're
nail
referencing.
his
Yeah.
fingernails became like claws, and
Yeah.
that he licked the dew of the grass. That sounds like a dog out licking the morning dew off the grass. Do you believe that Nebuchadnezzar was the first werewolf mentioned in the Bible?
Well, in the Bible for sure. If you equate him with the werewolf, but something he changed somehow, some way, and it's we're kind of led to understand it's a punishment for being too hubris, too antichrist-like, and so I looked at those descriptions many times and thought, what do I do with that? Um, and I thought I'd save that for book 4 because that's when I'm going to get into some of the really odd things, and I'm going to dig into that a little bit deeper. So, and what I thought is it's either something to do with taking it back to a sort of original sort of nature of humankind, or it's reflecting a different type of being of the spurious offspring created by the fallen angels. And it may be akin to uh, what happened, and it would be through the same kinds of powers, what happened with the mythos of Zeus and King Lycaon in Greek mythology, where he gets offside with Zeus and he turns him into a werewolf. And of course, he's already a giant, but so is Nebuchadnezzar. He's from the Rephaim bloodlines. And so you
You
see
also got the wolf that the two twins of Rome. So
yeah,
you got, I mean, you keep seeing a
yeah,
lot of this stuff over
yeah,
and over and over.
and they're the offspring of Mars and or Ares in the Greek pantheon. So it's an important allegory kept alive, and a possibility. And we also get connections to these werewolves as being different than the dog people, but kind of similar, but a little bit different in the mythology. And one wonders whether or not there's a connection there to jackal type of gods, right? Like Anubis, and is that part of how some of this comes about, or is it something else? So I want to do a lot more research on connecting all of that. And
Yeah, there's even a
but
story about the Bigfoots going to war with the dogmen or the werewolves as well.
yeah, yeah, there's that's all part of the different mythology strains of creations of the fallen angels. And I don't remember the name off the top of my head, but in the um, Gnostic book Pistis Sophia, and I think it's a chapter like 129 or 123, and it's a Gnostic gospel, but it's describing the pit prison of giants that were put in there, seemingly by the description as parent gods before the flood. But they have all of these different descriptions of these archons that are locked in the pit prison. And some of them have multiple heads, but most of them, there's also a variation that has a single head. So in there you have a watcher that's got a head of an ape and one that has the head of a bear. And you could make a case for Bigfoot coming from both of those. You also have some ape gods and monkey gods that are in
Jasher
Southeast
9.
Asia as well. Yeah.
Well, yeah,
So
that's getting into Jasher 9, talking
yeah,
about the Tower of Babel,
yeah,
where God smote 1/3 of the humanity, and then the 1/3 he turned into monkey men and
yeah,
elephant men, and then the
yeah.
other third he changed their language and scattered them out into the land. Yeah,
So there's
interesting.
all of that stuff that's out there that I want to do, I want to get into in book 4, plus a whole bunch of other stuff. So, because again, it's connected to lion men. It's connected to,
Moab.
dogmen. Yeah, the
Yeah,
lion men of Moab,
yeah.
and or the lion-like faces of the men of Gad and Arioch in the Giant Wars. That means lion-like as well, and he's part of the 4 giant kings, and that's rooted in all of that is rooted in Aryan Ariel in the Hebrew, which is eerily close to Aryan. And the Aryans were the bloodlines that the Achaemenid kings of Persia take their bloodlines back to. And as you look at some of the gods that are worshipped in Mesopotamia, Nergal is the war god after the flood. Is also worshipped in the area where Avim are there as well. There's a pocket of Avim over there, and Nergal is depicted with a lion's head. And then you have lots of other gods in other pantheons like Mahis and Sekhmet and elsewhere where you're going to have a lion face for a god. And also in there, there's a god named Nebaz that is worshipped by the Avim. And that means in Hebrew, a barking god. And he was depicted with a dog's head. So it's like a jackal god, like what Anubis would be.
So yeah, we just covered a whole lot of territory right there in a very teeny tiny amount of time, but yeah. Oh, I know another thing I was going to let you know that I stumbled across that I know that you'll appreciate. What is it? Jacques Vallée and both J. Allen Hynek are both Rosicrucians.
Yep.
Then what was it? That Pasolka lady that just released the book talking about aliens and stuff like that. That was on Joe Rogan's podcast. She told me, or she didn't tell me, she told Joe Rogan that she had went to Jacques Vallée's house, and he had a whole bookshelf completely from floor to ceiling that was nothing but books on angels. And then next to that, he had a whole nother bookshelf that was nothing but fallen angels. And she thought that was just, she couldn't believe that he had that much research on angels in his library.
Yeah, because he doesn't understand the religious aspect of the Rosicrucians and their belief systems. So um, that's why studying the secret societies can give you a lot of information that you can link into and feeds out into these other organizations and mythoses that are out there, because they're the ones who control the ancient information from a polytheist perspective. So um, it's important to understand that. I think for people who are trying to understand the world that we live in, is that these various groups of peoples and stories are coming together, that's starting to produce one consistent sort of narrative, and that it's in time for the end time. And this is going to play a large role in the deception in the end time. Part of it's going to be true, part of it's probably not going to be true. And it's why one of the reasons why I always like to underline with people why it's important to understand prehistory to understand the end time, because as Ecclesiastic 1 talks about, nothing is new under the sun. What was will be again. And as you move on into that chapter in about verse 17 and 18, it says that the understanding of this is only going to bring grief and sorrow. So, as bad as it was in the time of the days of Noah, both before the flood and after the flood, it's going to be exactly like that. Giants walked amongst them, and in many different flavors, it seems, and the gods walked amongst them. So, what they have to do is prepare us to accept that, but not from the exact truth. They need to change the narrative so we're not looking in the right places. We're looking to our position in this universe, so we can take our chair at the galactic table and be like the rebels and help fight for our freedom. They're trying to lead us away from God and into that rebellion. I don't think I might be wrong, but my speculation is I don't think they're going to say, hey, we are the gods of old
Oh
and we
no,
are the
they definitely.
rebellious ones.
They're definitely trying to prepare us because I mean, with all this stuff going on here recently with the drones or UFOs or whatever out there in New Jersey, flying all over the U.S. They're seeing them everywhere. Remember back was it a couple of years ago, the thing from Montana that floated across the U.S. over a 4-day period. They couldn't shoot it down. Um, but yeah, there's footage over in Afghanistan where 4 of these things are literally hovering over a military base out there, and they fired a missile and it hit 2 of them and did nothing to them. They were still just sitting there in the sky. And in fact, you can look that video up and watch it. But yeah, the all the stuff that's going on, all these military bases over in England that are just talking about how they're just hovering and
Yeah,
hanging out. And for hours. That's the thing. It's like people think, well, these drones, they could do this, they could do it's like
yeah,
any drone that you could buy, that you could
yeah,
purchase, that you as an individual could purchase, they won't
yeah,
stay up in the air longer than 1 hour.
yeah.
And these things are sitting there for hours, sometimes all day.
And the governments don't do anything about it.
No, they're incapable of doing anything
Yes.
about it.
And anything else, if they had a capability to take them down, they would. That's the thing, right? Because you don't enter into that type of
You
airspace anywhere with, unidentified flying objects, UAPs, UFOs, whatever you want to call them. It's angelic technology, and that these are either fallen angels and or their offspring who have had access to that technology all along. And that's why, when we talked about fairies on that first show and we started to get into the different kinds of fairies, and in book 1, I talk about the gnomes who are the grays as they're described, and they have flying machines that come through portals and they kidnap people, do sexual experimentation on. And I do 2 descriptions in book 1 that if you didn't know it was a fairy abduction, you'd swear it was a gray alien abduction because it's identical. It's been with us all the way through. And that this is the technology that was there before the flood, may have been starting to peak again shortly again after the flood, if it's like the days of Noah, both before and after the flood, and why you have those 2 intercessions with the flood and with Babel, that if they had the capability with that type of technology that we're seeing out there today that we can't do anything about, they would have had the destruction to destroy the world by fire, which is why I think the flood comes, whether God brings it or he has the fallen angels bring it, depending on whether or not you're reading the Bible or the polytheist accounts, which again sort of throws a wrench into their saying, well, the God of the Bible is evil because he brought the flood, except that their accounts say their own God brought it. But that's a different rabbit hole. But God permits it and or instructs that it's going to happen, so that the destruction by fire that 2 Peter 3 talks about is reserved for the end time. And so if that's what it is, and that's what I think it is, as that angelic technology, then that's the type of warfare that's coming, that's going to be used in the last 7 years in the various wars. And this is the technology that is being developed in parallel with AI and quantum computing. And we got in the news about some of the Google's advanced
Oh,
AI quantum computer that just came
Willow's
out.
new quantum
Yeah.
chip. Yeah.
Yep. And I've been talking about this all along, that you need to merge these technologies to get to the beast system. And this is all angelic technology. And so cryptocurrency now is going to be wrapped into that. And AI is being pushed on again out of Davos, and the Davos crew in January,
Well,
that you
don't forget
have to get.
CERN. Don't forget CERN because that's where we got the internet, World Wide Web, and all that, and that's tying
Yeah,
into it.
well, and that's where AI and quantum computing was being used. So you can go into multiple dimensions because it's a multi-dimensional technology. And you can search in multiple places. Why you need the AI, because the quantum was more of a rifle shot. You needed more of a shotgun shot to search and be more efficient on it. And crypto has to be developed a little bit further so that it can't be decoded from another dimension, and because they have to protect the assets of the royals. They can't have people getting in and stealing it. but it's the AI that's been slow, which is why they were saying we have to get AI ramped up to make all of this come together, because they're getting very, very impatient. And I don't know whether we talked about this on some of the shows about with CERN as well, but that's an acronym, but it's based on a pan-like god, or an Azazel-like god. And so people might be familiar with Odin, who's a horn god, um, which is the same as Cernunnos in the Druidic pantheon. In the Etruscan pantheon, which is Proto-Roman, so they're the
Yeah, that's the one
Aboriginals there first.
in the Etruscans is where he looks like Hellboy.
Yeah, and he's actually called CERN in some of the mystics records. Some people say it's Inuus, but that's a separate one. CERN was one of the main ones, CERN as it's spelled. And in Indo-Aryan, which is the language of the giants, of the Aryans, Indo-Aryan, it means it's spelt two different ways, but means the same thing. We just see it transliterated into the languages a little bit different, but it's spelled CERN and KERN, and means the horn-headed god. And so they work all of their imagery into the projects that they're doing. So it's just what they do. And so when we're looking at this interdimensional technology, and we know that in a lot of the alien mythos and accountings, they come seemingly through portals or from underwater, but they're not coming interplanetary. It's more interdimensional.
Yeah, that was
Eh,
what FBI document 6751 laid out, was that they knew back in 1948 that these things were interdimensional. And the terminology that they used in that document was mind-blowing, because
Yeah,
they said that they come from an ethereal plane, of not quite like ours, but an ethereal. And it said people who are familiar with terms like the locas and the talas and things like that will be familiar with this. And it even talked about that they were giant in stature compared to us.
yeah, yeah. So that's all part of what's coming, and they're essentially helping us right now to advance that technology, to get there so that we can make that stand. And I think, again, you can make that analogy back with the Nazis. So you see them come out with the Tiger and Panzer tanks. This is technology we're still using today. It was revolutionary. It came out of nowhere. They came up with the jet engine, the rocket engine. Came out of
Well,
nowhere. They came up with that bell-shaped thing that people think is interdimensional.
the
And
Diglocka.
yeah,
And they also
and
came out with the Hanabu, because supposedly when they was it Maria Orsic and Sigrun, the two Vril maidens, when they were tasked with making contact with the dead SS officer,
yep,
they supposedly made contact with some entity that reigned out of the Aldebaran system, and that's when they
yep,
were given. They did the automatic writing. One was writing in an ancient Templar language, and the other one was
yep,
writing in an ancient I believe it was Sumerian, so some sort of early Sanskrit. But it
yep,
took them years to decode that. And when they did, one was the plans for the Diglocka, the other one was the plans for the
yeah.
Hanabu.
Yeah, and Sanskrit is another form of Indo-Aryan. So it's the original language of the giants, both before and after the flood. And so when they were asked how they were able to develop all of this, they said, we didn't. It was given to us. And so they would
Was it
be,
Oberth? Herman Oberth?
yeah. And the adepts of Ariosophy were in communications with spiritual guides, aliens, celestial white mafia, whatever you want to call them. But they were receiving this technology information to develop. They weren't given the technology, they were given the information to develop it. And I think that's exactly what's been happening with our technology today as well. And even though it was advanced with Operation Paperclip and wrapping up a lot of that technology and bringing it back to the US, it's gone on steroids as in the last 5 years again. And I know we say that every 5 years, but it's just moving at such a lightning speed right now. It's going into an area we don't understand, and it's angelic technology.
Well, not only that, but what was it? It was 2017 when a lot of this stuff was really coming to light about OSAP and ATIP and so on. When we started learning about this, that the government, finally admitted that still been studying and trying to interact with these UFOs. And then, here we're talking like maybe 7 years of time, and look at how much has come out since then. I mean, even back in 2004 during the Nimitz incident, when Fravor, the pilot, Fravor encountered the Tic Tac. I mean, it was Kevin Day who was the radar operator in that group on the destroyer that kept seeing these things on the radar. And they had got this brand new radar that they had just started using, and that allowed him to see these things that they had never seen before. And there wasn't just like a few of them, we're talking hundreds of them. And he would say that these things would drop from 85,000 feet down to the deck, which is sea level, in a matter of seconds, like 2 seconds, and make no sonic booms whatsoever, that these things could come down and they could literally just hover for hours out there in very strong winds. And that's the thing. It's like they didn't have to go back and refuel, that they didn't have to land or anything like that, but they could just sit out there all day long. And so when he finally, his curiosity got the better of him. So he tasked Fravor and the other plane to go out there and investigate what they were seeing on radar. And when they got there, the what is it, what they call merge plot, when a plane gets in an area where they're looking for something and they say merge plot, then that means you're right there in the vicinity. Start looking around, see what you see. And what his attention was drawn to was down in the ocean. It looked like something was under the water, like it had just submerged, like a submarine or something. He said it was white water overturning. And that's when he noticed the Tic Tac just bouncing around like a ping pong ball. And he said that when he finally decided to go down to engage with it, he said he turned his nose and he started to go down towards it. And he said right when he did, that thing just went bloop and turned towards him, and it started mirroring him. And so they were just like, it was coming up as he was coming down. And when it got right, he said when it got to the nose of his plane, it just shot off in the distance, and they couldn't believe how fast it went. But yeah.
Yeah, it's technology that we just can't fathom yet. So now, if they're feeding it to us, they're still trying to develop it. Maybe they've developed it further than what we think, but we don't see it being displayed against the angels. So I would suspect that maybe we don't get quite all of the technology so that we can turn on them, so to speak. Because, when you start to understand polytheism, every creature and every person in that belief system seems to have a specific, and this is my terminology and speculation, they seem to have a specific war gene, and they are the perpetual war people, and there's rivals that are always ongoing, which sort of hurts them in getting to the direction that they want to go, but they still work in an alliance. But there's always these wars that break out between the visible ones, and one suspects that's the same thing with the invisible ones and with the other spirits offspring.
Yeah, it's very fascinating that, like I said, and then even when Joe Rogan, when he had Bob Lazar came on there and he was talking about the 9 craft that he was aware of that they had in their possession, and he said he dropped a bombshell, and I still can't believe that people have not reacted to this. Like, I mean, as soon as he said it, my jaw hit the floor. But he said one of the craft that we have out there at S4, he said it was found at an archaeological dig. So he goes, it's not just old. He goes, it's ancient.
Ancient,
So
yeah.
yeah, this is fallen angel technology that they are still digging up and finding to this day.
Yeah. And it sort of makes you rethink to Peter a little bit more. Again, when we talked, mentioned it earlier, um, about the destruction by fire. I mean, it has in there, in sort of paraphrasing it again, it's using the term in the beginning, which are the same, coming out of Greek, the same words used in Genesis 1, only in Hebrew. You had this earth that was in the water and out of the water that perished. And people will just say, well, that's the flood, except that the whole earth didn't perish. Only what was on the land perished. So this is meaning a complete destruction. And the destruction is fire and not the water. So what's that earth in the water and out of the water? And I think when you get into how you could translate Genesis 1 as the earth not only was void and formless, or without form. Um, you could translate that it became void and formless, and using different passages throughout the Bible without trying to litigate the whole thing today. But what's interesting about that, if you had destroyed the earth down to its foundations, as some passages would seem to suggest in the Bible, then that destruction would have likely have caused the waters above to collapse into chaos. And then in the renewal of the earth, as Psalms 104 refers to, when God sends his spirit, he renews the earth, which is seen in 1:2. You start this renewal process of the earth, and that to create life on earth, you got to reseparate the waters so you can have life on earth. But it's that destruction by fire that was in the beginning, which is angelic technology. And if nothing is new under the sun, and that also may be perhaps a better location for the angelic rebellion if you were to continue down that stream in terms of when that rebellion took place.
And you also have
And
the Middle Eastern account where it talks about the gods that went to war with one
yeah,
another, and they were using these crafts that they refer to
yeah,
as vimanas. Well, that
yes.
also sounds like when Michael came down and he caused them to go to war, and that the fallen angels had to watch their children kill one another.
Yeah, that was technology described in those accounts in the Vedas as planet destroying capability by fire-like weaponry. And so when God, created the life by reseparating the waters, things start to make sense that if nothing is new under the sun, what was will be again. It starts with the angelic rebellion. It comes to another peak with the spurious offspring of the giants and trying to bring about a world government or an Atlantean empire. And the floods brought about because of the corruption and the violence that is being caused is through the giants and the wars and the technology that the Book of Enoch says was given to the giants in terms of the crafts of war, not only just how to do war, but making weapons and the total art of and craft of it all, which means technology was likely given to them. And so that technology was more advanced than what we have today, and we're still catching up to it, and that it could have destroyed the world by fire. And this is what's being reserved for the end time. So
And that's the
if
thing,
it's,
is that they were here for almost 1,300 years. So when they came down back in the days of Jared leading up to the flood, we're talking almost 1,300
yeah,
years.
yeah.
And so, of course, that's the thing. When people think of things like Star Trek or even Star Wars, they think they're looking into the future, but actually, you're looking back into the past.
That's the thing that people don't understand. And even though it's done in their mode of entertainment and it's done to give it, a riveting narrative, it's the allegories, events, and names of the characters that's reflecting their belief system, their genealogies, and their history and what they intend to do. And that's what their whole entertainment system is designed to do, and to put it in plain sight because they know we're too stupid, even though they're telling us what they're going to do.
Yeah. So and that's the thing, is I believe that that's part of the system, an operating system, that they have to telegraph. They have to put this information forth from a legal standpoint. Otherwise, there's maneuvers and things they can't do without putting the information out first.
Seems to be the case. There's no real explanation to do it. I mean, you can say hubris and narcissist, which the giants were, and the
I
gods
believe that. I
seemingly
believe
were,
that.
but you still wouldn't give the tactical advantage, even if you think you're superior.
No. And even, what was it, Greg Renrich, the gentleman that I tried to get into the film Higher Entities, was the person that had been in some of the deep underground military bases. He'd been at S-20, which is Dulce, as well as S-4 and a few others. But he told me that one time when he was down in one of these underground military bases, that he had seen the giants down there. He said that they were around 15, 25 feet tall, varied in height. But one of the things that he heard them talking to some scientists or soldiers one day, and he said that they referred to themselves as the Nephilim, and said that they were preparing for an intergalactic war with God, and they believed they were going to win.
Yeah,
So
well,
you would,
they do believe they're going to win. I know the fallen angels don't believe they can win, but they know all the people that they created and their followers believe they can win because the fallen angels are deceiving them in that way. So yeah, they're preparing for that rendezvous with destiny and that showdown, and they want to bring it, about. And when you're talking about giants of that size, a couple of things I would say is one is that there's two different sizes to the giants, one before the flood and one after the flood. Now, after the flood, we don't get anything biblically beyond Goliath's description, which on a royal cubit would be 11 feet 3 inches and described as stout. And Og's bed was 9 cubits and 4 cubits wide, so 7 feet wide, 16 feet long, made of iron to hold his weight. And I'm using a royal cubit, just as Josephus says, to apply to the giants, which was 21 inches, and Og was the king of Edrei and Ashtaroth and Gath for Goliath. So you have uh, a measurement that would put Gog at somewhere between, say, 12 to 15 feet tall and probably 4 to 5 feet wide, maybe as much as 6 to fit in the bed. And that word stout is a word that's used to describe these giants. So they're like WWF wrestlers. And the bed was kept at Rabbah for Og for, centuries to remind the Israelites of the monsters, the size of the monsters that they fought against. And that's a 2-to-1 height to width ratio, which is generally the rule of thumb for the stout description, based on that measurement model. And outside the Bible, though, we get Orontes, the Greek mythology, and Gilgamesh, all being 11 cubits tall, which would put him at 19 feet tall. And Gilgamesh was 4 cubits wide, so that would put him 7 feet wide. And he's a dark-haired giant by his description, so something different amongst them, probably a different watcher. So we get that height as sort of the maximum in the post-Diluvian side, but it was not unusual to go from 20 feet to 40 feet tall, and some people say even taller for the antediluvian giants. And that the post-Diluvian giants, if they were recreated after the flood, they had more restrictions put on them, size-wise, power-wise, obviously length of life, as according to Genesis 6:3. And we don't know whether or not some giants survived the flood with the help of the fallen angels. So it's a possibility. I lean heavily towards second incursion, but it's
It's
possible that the fallen angels took them off Earth, in the Earth, in another dimension, in flying, UAPs or whatever, but somehow, some way, or on another ark to have them show up after the flood. But clearly in Sumerian, Greek, and I think with the biblical accounts, as you match that up with the Ugaritic accounts, you get the Rephaim as being post-Diluvian giants created from the offspring gods Baal and Anat and the rest of the Baalim, versus El and the parent gods before the flood.
And that's the thing, like you have a lot of the things where they talk about, most abductees talk about being taken under the water, or going through these portals and being taken what they think is probably inside the earth. You got the hollow earth, which
Yep.
we got into that. We did that whole documentary, and we got into the thing about Admiral Byrd and things that he saw. Even the fact that they went down there to Antarctica during 1947 for Operation High Jump, where they took the British and they took the Australians with them, and they weren't even there for maybe a couple of weeks, and they had to tuck tail and run and come back.
Yeah.
And then what was it, down in South America, they had intercepted one of their radio things where they said that they had encountered craft that could go from pole to pole in a matter of
Yeah.
seconds.
Yeah. It's absolutely crazy. And again, in the Ugaritic text, which is just a terrific sort of sourcing to utilize because it's in the original Semitic and it's very close to the Hebrew. We actually have a lot of words that you can use as you take that back to the Hebrew. And so the Rapiu, RPM, which would have been the original Semitic for Rephaim, um, and translator as Rapiu or Rapium, as a lot of the translators do. These were the offspring of Baal and Anat, and they were giants. They were dynastic kings, and they were healers that could heal themselves and others. And they also went back and forth between the underworld, or Hades and Sheol, and this world. And they would do that on certain occasions, and they would do that with taking a funeral procession through those portals. And it's a standard constant in the occult cultures that the giants had the ability to go back and forth between the other world, just as the fallen angels did. And if you have other creations, and again, I have to say if, but I think there's lots of, you know, information out there to suggest there's, like, the Greys as part of this elementals, of the four groups of elementals. They're out of one of those groups, and those are the ones that are mentioned in the New Testament, to take it biblically. You'll see it show up as rudiments and elements, and you're going to get that in Colossians and in Galatians, and they keep us enslaved in this world. Inanimate objects won't keep us enslaved, whereas elements could also be used for the basic part of the universe. They're part of that visible sort of hierarchy, and they seem to be in control of some of this technology, like the UAPs. And so it seem that this technology is part of that other group that's working with the descendants of the giants, or the royals and the people who rule this world, but not in sort of an equal partnership yet.
Well, not only that, but also the Greys themselves are almost, they are some sort of a synthetic life form. They're almost like machines. And that's the thing, is like when I think of the gray aliens, I think of the movie Avatar, and that these are avatars that are created for the Nephilim giants to
Yeah.
inhabit, to be able to operate in our dimension, plus these other realms that you're talking about, because they have the ability to blink in and out and go in between, but
Yeah.
they still have a physical form to them, and they have technology that we can't even wrap our heads around, because again, this is
Yes.
fallen angel technology.
Yeah.
But so yeah, it's pretty
Well,
fascinating.
and it's amazing that we're getting that avatar imagery that is absolutely, dominates a lot of the entertainment today, and just the word and the usage of it is out there. So again, this is a term that's understood in all of the occult languages. Um, but there's two terms that go with that. One is avatar, the other one is avatara. And I actually got this out of Strong's Cyclopedia from the 1800s, the which is used in, you use it in conjunction with Strong's original dictionary. And I did that for book 2, because I'm going right back to the sourcings on things. And so um, in the occult, gods like Vishnu were the avatars, and Buddha would be an avatara. So you would have somebody already born. It has a host that comes in a symbiotic relationship, to provide power and knowledge. And so
So you're
Vishnu
saying
had,
it's
like,
something like a possession, more or less, being
but dip,
possessed.
but different.
Yeah, but
Possession
it's
typically is pretty violent, because the host is trying to cast that spirit out. There's two spirits in one soul, with one being a Nephilim, is not going to be symbiotic. There's a nuance to that in the occult with advanced adepts. Through rituals, words, and knowing the names, they believe they can control the disembodied spirit of the giants, and that they can use them to bring into them. This would be the demonic trickster spirit that the shamans, or the crazy clowns, the jesters, and various areas
so
would
you're
use
coming
to
at.
control it. So, but there's a difference between demonic possession and avatara. The
But
avatara,
are you let me just clarify real quick, because I'm trying to match up with you, what your line of thinking.
yep.
Are you saying that this is more or less, or more akin to, say, something like Aleister Crowley and them, when they talk about traversing and going down into the abyss and coming back and bringing back knowledge? Is that kind of what you're saying, when they come back and they come back with something?
That's more astral planing,
Okay.
unless he's actually physically going in. But you're mixing with these different types of spirits in another dimension. So, well, this is actually what happens in what I call the physical world with an oikotarian. An oikotarian means a dwelling place for the spirit. So when you get in Jude 1:6, the word habitation that the angels left, that's the Hebrew word or Greek word oikaterion, which literally means a dwelling place for the spirit. It's used one other time in the New Testament in 2 Corinthians 5:2 for a house in heaven, or a dwelling place for your spirit that we're groaning for, because we have that house here, a dwelling place for our spirit on earth, which is the soul and the body. And the spirit comes from heaven, except for when it's a counterfeited spirit by the fallen angels passed on to their spurious offspring. So they, when you have a physical body and a soul and a spirit and a that's occupying that, and a god or a fallen angel enters into you, um, they're doing that because the individual wants that, and they're inviting them in, and it's to add additional power. So
There
now,
could be a counterpoint to that also. I'm
yeah, let
sorry to
me,
keep interrupting you,
yeah,
but
let
go
me
ahead.
just finish the point, and then because I'll get to it quickly. So, and Shiva also did a number of incarnations, as they call it. And an incarnation is their version of the Christ consciousness as well. So we get an example of this biblically, two examples, with the second one having lots, the one having one single one that we can point to. We have demonic possession that shows up in the New Testament, which are devils, that and unclean spirits and evil spirits that Jesus is dealing with, which is Greek daemon for demon. But Satan, which is the devil, or diabolos for devil, they shouldn't have translated those devils, the demon spirits. They should have done it as, demon spirits, not devils. But Satan enters into Judas to give him the courage to continue to betray Jesus, to get over that hump. And he's also allegorically, Judas, called the son of perdition, which connects into the definition of Antichrist as well, and understanding that their Antichrist figure will be an incarnation of Shiva or Vishnu or other ones that gives the power to Lord Maitreya in the end time in terms of their understanding. But through the Bible, we can understand that they have the ability to do this, and different than demonic possession by the disembodied spirits, but uh, similar, I would put it that way. So we need to be prepared for both, that this is a concept that biblically we can back up to a certain degree, and that it's a constitutional belief system. And even if you don't believe it as a Christian, understand that they believe this, and it's what they do with their belief system that's important.
And just what I was trying to get into was the whole thing about what they try to take something that is of God, that is pure, which is sexual relations, creating a new life. That is what sex, like ninth degree sex magic and things like that get into, is that they are trying to create a vessel, but at the same time, make it to where something impure, something demonic, or something, like you said, unclean spirits to come in and to cohabitate in this life form that they create.
Yeah, because if you look at the end time, if you want, as the adversarial forces, you have all of these disembodied spirits of the giants, ones that are roaming the earth, perhaps ones that are already in Hades or Sheol with where they say their gods are, and the ones that are going to be coming out of the pit prison. And we do know you have demon spirits in the pit prison. If people have a good look at Ezekiel 32 for the terrible ones, um, these are the ones that are in the sides of the prison, in cells, and they're speaking to another Rephaim giant, the Pharaoh, along with the mighty, which is the Hebrew El. So these demonic spirits are mighty ones, so connected to Gibberim and the giants, and they did terrible things while they were here on the earth, and they were sent directly to the pit prison. But not all of them were, but they're coming out with the fallen angels, um, in the last 7 years, and they're going to require an oiketerion. They're going to require some sort of clone body, some sort of creation that can house their spirit so that they can interact physically. And I think some of them are going to be actually through the process of whether it's a complete possession takeover, which is hostile, or the shaman example that I talked about, are going to be part of the end time. You know, when we look at Antichrist, when it's time for Armageddon and the false prophet, you have demons coming out of his mouth, and each of their mouths and sent out to gather the kings to Armageddon. And so you could translate that as we generally get it, but you could also have that translated that they're controlling the demons with their mouths, as you take that out of the Greek. And there may be something with the technology of the image of the beast that is an oiketerion capable of housing demonic spirits, as in a teraphim idol, which is a talking idol out of the Old Testament. So there's something in some types of objects where either it's a fallen angel or it's a demonic spirit. Typically, these are family spirits or familiar spirits that are talked about with the teraphims. So one would relate that with the polytheist belief system of descendants and disembodied spirits of the giants. And then what's also interesting, you might make that connection in Daniel 2:43, where you have the descendants of these metallic empires are going to mix their seed with humankind. As you take that back to the Hebrew, you might infer that that's a possession as well. That's a spiritual possession that's going on. But I tend to link more towards physical sex and seed versus the dimensional there. But we get a few accounts where we need to be prepared for some sort of inner workings with kings and antichrist and false prophets with these demonic spirits, and that there needs to be a home for all of these disembodied spirits. And then we see these crazy things in Revelation 9, these crazy riders and these beasts that they're riding. These seem to be weapons created for war, and I wonder whether or not that's some sort of warlike technologically created oiketerians for these disembodied spirits to be the riders on those horses. And very interestingly, they're the exact same description that's described in Joel 1 and 2.
Yeah, I wanted to bring up the whole thing about the covenant of the many with just what took place here recently, last month at the UN, and see what his thoughts are about that, plus what we got going on in Syria right now with Damascus, if he believes that we may already be in the tribulation.
Certainly watching the events very, very closely. So I would say we're still in the sorrows, and we're not in the last 7 years, or perhaps tribulation starting even 3 years before that, as you referenced Revelation 2:10 for 10 days of tribulation. It's a possibility. I think we're still shaping the geopolitical network up of what's going to be happening. And so it's interesting to watch, but I think that if you're referring to Daniel 9:27 for the start of that covenant, is that we haven't seen enough happen yet to be in that position. So I think the sorrows are still getting stronger. So we haven't seen the false prophets show up. We haven't seen Babylon show up. Babylon controls these 10 kings. These 10 kings are going to be reigning with the start of this covenant. And so I think it's leading us in the direction, and our technology isn't there yet to bring about the beast system, or at least it's not been revealed. Things are still sort of developing.
But it's getting awfully close with all this Willow and quantum computers and quantum chips and so on. So it's
Yeah, I'm not
very
saying it's not on
fascinating.
the horizon, and we're in the fig tree generation. It's just, yeah, and a few catastrophes might get us there quickly. But people, I would suggest to people is keep an eye on the events, because directionally all of this is very important for how the things come about. But if we had a war that were to break out and 10% of the population were killed, people would say that would be apocalyptic. But yet, when the seals are open, there's 25% of the population and destruction of the world. And that's not Armageddon, but it's so bad that the kings of the earth are running into their cave dwellings, whether it's underground bunkers or what, underground cities, whatever, maybe into other dimensions, who knows. They think it's so bad that it's got to be the day of the Lord's wrath, but that's at the end, that's the year of the Lord's wrath at the end of the 7 years. So, and then you have the trumpets to come. So it's going to get bad. It's going to be unimaginable. But I don't think that we're there yet. And I've done several shows with Derek, Gilbert, who was looking at the start of October 7th as being the start of, moving into the Armageddon sort of period. And he and I disagree a little bit on that. I just think we're just haven't seen enough of the other events sort of show up. And with the start of the covenant, you have the people who are in the covenant land of Judah will be permitted with that covenant to begin their sacrifices on a wing, an extremity, or an overspreading of the temple. And I can't see that happening as long as Islam is still in play in a significant way. So I think you need the universal religion in place to do it, and those false prophets to do the false prophets of doom to get everybody to convert and to bring Islam to heel in part of the original Enochian mysticism or Babylon religion that comes, it was also at Babel. So I think that needs to happen. And when we see the woman riding the beast of empires, because she's part of all of the beast empires, is that Babel religion, she is riding it with the reins and controlling that empire. And so much so, the kings grow jealous that they're going to give their power over to Antichrist towards the midpoint of the last 7 years, so that they will destroy, along with Antichrist, Babylon, and then Antichrist comes to power. So all of that implies to me, my understanding, that Babylon is in place before the midpoint, at the time of the rising of the kings, and somehow is in control of the kings. So they're coming to power because, or in jointly, but Babylon having a senior position of how that 10-king empire comes together in the end times. So moving in that direction is where I'm kind of at, but not there yet.
And the let's see here. Let's jump over, because you bring up Babylon, so we need to get into the Jesuits and the church and so on. I mean, people think of things like the CIA and Mossad and things like that when they think of intel agencies. But what a lot of people are not really familiar with is that the Jesuits have the oldest intel agency, which is known as the Entity, and they've been at it far longer than anybody. And this ties in with the Masons as well, because this says that the same, I can't remember the quote from the late 1800s, but it said the head person of the Jesuits is the same as the head of the Freemasons. They are one and the same. And that's the thing, is that I know that the Jesuits or the Catholics are not allowed to be Freemasons and vice versa. So you got all this working together leading up to, which is going to tie in with the end times and Babylon. And a lot of people they just don't understand just how evil the Jesuits truly are, and all the things that they did. Because like, you go back to the early church 70, the early 70 church fathers that were going out with the Bible, the scriptures, and that they were going around and converting it into different languages for people to read. And it was when the Jesuits finally took power, they were the ones who were trying to get rid of all the other translations except for the translations they wanted people to have. And they didn't even want the regular people to have the Bible. You had to come to the church and listen to them read the Bible. And that was the thing, is they always used fears of excommunication, and that the Pope or the bishops and so on, that they were the voice of God to the people. And so, like I said, it's fascinating. A lot of people don't really look at the Catholic Church or the Jesuits, and they hear the name Jesuit, they hear the name Rosicrucians, they hear the Templars, all these different names, and most people, they don't I know I was like that at first too. I didn't fully understand everything. You know, it's evil, but why is it evil? What's it getting into? So
Yeah, good stuff. So you'll be happy to know that I spend time on the Jesuits in book 2
good.
and show their beginnings and their connections and how evil that they are. And to the point where I have a chapter called Rogue Jesuits. So I don't put them intersecting into the thelemic tree of hierarchy at the Freemasonic level. They're they're sponsored in two ways, of two levels of the Italian black nobility, of the junior level and the senior level. So I would put them more up to the Committee of 300, and if you include the as a branch organization intersecting in there, but one that is at the head of the trunk, and or the Council of 33 Families. So, and kind of how I get there is that um, the Jesuits, they are the most evil, powerful organization that the Royals encounter against the Roman Church, and they were created by the Royals to complete the Templar dream. They're actually called the New Templars, and were instituted into the church to replace the Templars to bring about the New Babylon, which was the dream of the Templar from within the church. And so I won't go through all of the history, but understand that Ignatius of Loyola, he sets off on his mission to change the church from the inside through being initiated through the Mary apparitions. And then is sponsored by Francis Borgia, who is the Grand Master of the Montesa organization and a Royale of the court, and sponsored by the king. And Montesa order took over the Templar assets in 1317 after the fall of 1307 of the Templars, so that the Roman Church didn't get it. And Ignatius of Loyola is going to sponsor the Jesuits, and he gets Ignatius out of jail when he's put in jail by the Inquisitors, but recognizes his potential through his black nobility Pope family line of the Borgia. He has several popes in his, including his grandfather, is going to get the Jesuits sponsored with papal bull into the church, and they get charge of education and the seminary schools. And then in 1550, Francis Borgia becomes a Jesuit. And by 1565, he gets control of the Jesuit order. And by 1570s, him and the king have bankrupted through wars the Vatican Church and get a hold of the banking, and they take it to Switzerland, which is, I don't want to get too far down that rabbit trail. So from there, they rise in power within the church and become very, very powerful. But so much so, they're starting to take down royals.
And that's where
And
they went with the whole thing about what was it, King James. I
yeah,
mean, the whole gunpowder plot thing, that was all
yeah,
Jesuits that were trying to kill him before he got this Bible, the 1611 KJV
yes,
out.
yep. There's these rivals that are going on, and the royals grow to hate them so much that by about 1800, they forced the Pope to disband the Jesuits. But then what happens is the royals get a little bit hubris, um, and that they're going to essentially put popes in prison in France. And then one of those popes that's in imprisonment reestablishes the Jesuits, so they have some protection from the royals again. And so they don't get all of their power back until about the 1880s, but with the rise of the Mary apparitions with Lourdes and Fatima and that whole thing, and later in Medjugorje, as they make another right turn, so to speak, it's all part of this mix of the new Babylon that they're going to create. So they're going to go rogue again in the end time. So the reason why I separate the two levels of black nobility is it's the junior black nobility that sponsors them back to power with the fall of the throne in Italy, and the junior black nobility are ones that moved over from Phoenicia to Venice and Florence and are the bankers, like the Medicis as an example. The senior black nobility are the families that go back through Julius Caesar and Augustus, but more accurately back to the 100 royal families of the senators that go back to Romulus and Remus, who their celestial mafia godfather was Ares or Mars of the Roman pantheon. So that would put them in a position not in the thelemic tree organizational structure of the trunk, but as a branch coming in and still answering to the families. But they'll go rogue again in the end time. And eventually so rogue that the 10 kings are going to rise up against Babylon with Antichrist to overthrow her, as Revelation 17 and Jeremiah 51 talk about.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's like I mean, you laid out quite a bit right there, but again, like I said, that's a lot of people. They know about the Guy Fawkes mask, and they know about Guy Fawkes. They know about the gun plot or B for Vendetta. That's pretty much the extent of what most people understand, but they don't understand that that was the Jesuit order, and that they sincerely wanted to destroy King James, who saw them for the threat that they were. And he was trying to get the Bible translated into common English, which was the 1611 edition, which would later go on to be the KJV that we have today. And I mean, they would, I mean, and that's the thing, like, dealing with my pastor, Pastor Dean, he gets into the whole thing about all these different translations that we have nowadays and all the issues with the translation. And that was the thing, is they finally realized, well, we can't get rid of the KJV. We'll just bury them in translations. And that's pretty much what we have today with all these translations, and all the errors that you find in a lot of these different translations, or things that have been omitted, or it has these little footnotes in there where it said this was not in the original text or whatever. This is They're still doing it today. They have not disappeared. They are still here among us. In fact, the Pope that we have today is a Jesuit. He's the first Jesuit Pope we've had in how many hundreds of years?
The first. And the leader of the Jesuits is the Black Pope. And
Exactly.
now and the Black Pope is now also the White Pope. And also the Convergence understood being in control as the third one, which is the Gray Pope. And so with absolute power, and even the Knights of St. John, which is an older organization, also involved on spies and banking and has special status at the UN, is subservient now because they replaced the leader of the Knights of St. John with a Jesuit as well. So they control all the powers, and they're moving forward to try and bring about their positioning with the New World Order as being the spiritual entity, which is why they're so globalist in their ideology. In the 1960s, you had them move to liberation theology, which is basically socialism, which was invented by the secret societies, social masonry. So anything from National Socialism to communism to anarchism and all progressivism, that's all comes out of social masonry. And they have the same policies. And so they're in bed with the globalist movement. They just want to be positioned as the universal church, but that's going to change once they start to position with polytheism, and that's going to cause some real internal damage, and there's going to be that war yet fought out as well. So I think the Vatican is where I would position them, is right where their Vatican is located, on Vaticanus Hill, outside the original 7 hills of Romulus and Remus, and the 7 hills where Rome begat. And Palatine would be the chief mountain, and where the Sibylline prophecies were held, and that I think Vaticanus will be subservient and a branch of the universal religion, just as they'll bring Islam in a similar kind of way.
And it's also fascinating. I know that I didn't realize just how much the Etruscans, who were the pre-Romans,
Yeah.
I mean, when I started looking at a lot of the archaeological stuff over there, especially like, what we call like megaliths and things like that, I mean, my goodness, it's like and you look at things like Darren Kuyu over in Turkey and all these
Yep.
places, and where they have underground cities that can hold up to 40,000 people. And like I said, I'm seeing this stuff over there and looking into the Etruscans. The what are we dealing with here? What is
They're-
this?
They are Indo-Aryans. They are akin to the Scythians. They are as you say, the Aboriginals after the flood in Italy, and akin to the Indo-Aryans that would have been before the flood, because they're all giants. And so the Scythians and the Etruscans are the people that the descendants of Japheth after Babel moved in and intermarried with. They were already there. So one of the things I do in book 2 is to establish that these Indo-Aryans are the aboriginals in the lands, and we can get there biblically with the definitions as were provided for these tribes that show up as Rephaim. But we also have to consider the other ones like the Etruscans, the Scythians, and the Aryans, and show how they sort of fit in. So there's 4 or 5 different groups of these post-Diluvian Indo-Aryans that the people from Babel are going to be intermixing with no matter where they migrate from Babel after Babel, which is about 101 years, as we look at the timing biblically. And so we get giants created by inference on that, or survived, or both, well before Babel, and are going to have civilizations there already. So you have their words mixing into the new languages. You have their imagery floating in, which is why you would get CERN as being one of the gods of the Etruscan pantheon, um, and why Pan would be considered one of those satyr gods, right? And Azazel is described as a uh, satyr god as well, or satyr, depending on how you want to pronounce that. And Baphomet, the uh, head that the Templars worshipped at the adept level, that means Bathro Mitra. And that means Father Mithras, Father Mithram, father of the Zoroastrian and Mithraic religion, which the Mithraic religion is a branch of Zoroastrianism, which was a religion of the Indo-Aryans of Persia and of the ones who migrated into the Indus Valley. And you'll like this, is that Mithras is this horn god, and that Mithras could have different names for the same angel. You have an order of degraded seraphim, I think, or watcher angels that become the satyrs. And so Mithra is this horn god that is understood in Zoroastrianism, who comes at the end of the age when the world is destroyed by fire, and then recreates a new world after that. He's like Shiva, where Shiva is thought to be based in the original Mithra understanding. Zoroastrian is the religion of the Indo-Aryans. And when we look at the name Mitra in Indo-Aryan or Sanskrit, which is an Indo-Aryan language, and very much similar spelling on words of things as you get into the Indo-Aryan words, it's understood as meaning a covenant, an alliance, or a bond. So now you have this Lord Maitreya individual that is said to make his entrance, according to Bailey and Gnostics, in about 2025, in the era of Lord Maitreya, which is their Antichrist. And that is Lord Mithra, who incarnates into beings like Vishnu and Shiva, and will be the incarnation that comes in the end time. So you get this interaction of all of these original religions and languages that is all pointing in the same direction for the same thing that's being talked about in the Bible. And Lord Maitreya is considered their Messiah. It's their allegory for this incarnation that's coming. And so it'll be interesting to see how that all sort of comes about. And Baphomet was considered a Chem Zoroaster, who is a Quinatar. And a Quinatar is some sort of horn god, similar to Molech or a Minotaur, but something a little bit different, but used for the allegory for the hidden bloodlines of the Merovingian Empire that produced Dagobert, and his descendants were de Bouillon, Anjou, Folk Anjou and the Paean, all of the Knights Templar who worship this goat god. I mean, you can't make this up. There's just this endless connection throughout history.
So the Etruscans and the Aryans that you're talking about, this all ties in with, I'm guessing, the whole thing about the Phoenicians and Sidon and Cain and so on. This is that what you're saying? You're saying this is all like one big coalesce.
Yeah, Phoenicia, it has giants in it as well that some of the descendants of Canaan are going to intermarry with, and they're going to create, hybrids with the Hittites and the Sidonians and peoples like that. So it's and Tyr is part of the Beast Empires, but not as a military empire, but as an economic empire. And it's with
And
all of the Beast Empires, and this is part of the allegory for the end time Babylon as well.
and Sidon, they had was it the princess that was named Europa? Is that
Yep,
is
yep,
okay? That's what I was
Euro-
thinking.
yep. And Cadmus, I think Cadmus and Europa were married.
Yeah,
Cadmus could also be the core angelic word from a Greek language for KDM for cadmium too, as you work that back into the history as well. The Cadmonites,
interesting.
yeah. So, and these are all proto people that are going to be there when the Canaanites move into the land of the covenant after Babel. And I think they're going to try and create the hybrid giants, hybrid human giants through intermarriage with the giants and dynasties thereof to try and throw off that curse of Ham, which creates, and Canaan is named after the bondage that he was going to be subjected to, and that by making a partnership with the giants, the Rephaim and Avim and all the different names of the giants in the covenant land, they create a hybrid set of giants. So the Egyptians called them the Shazu. They were 7 to 9 feet tall. And so it starts to make sense. Now you have in the Table of Nations, you only get patriarchs that are named there that come from Noah. But with the Canaanites, you get Canaan, of course, but then you get Heth, and then you get Sidon, sons of Canaan, as they're listed in the Bibles. And then you get 9 patriarchless families, which goes back to the Hebrew word machpaka, which basically means a different kind or a different species. And the reason why I think that they are patriarchless is they have Rephaim patriarchs, and they intermarry with daughters of Canaan, Heth, and Sidon. And that you could look at Arba, which is the patriarch for the Anakim giants. His name isn't listed in the Table of Nations as an example. And when you have Timnah and uh, Eliphaz intermarrying in Genesis 36, that's giving us information outside of the Table of Nations for this intermarriage. So we get an example of that. And I think all of these 9 patriarchless names you can trace back to Rephaim patriarchs. And so I do in book 2. And I think that's how you get these Shazu, Amau, Shamau. They have different names and different cultures around the land that were smaller than the giants, but giant-like. And so Amorites would be one of those groups. They're giant-like, but not as big as the original giants that the Canaanites moved in and amongst of. And I also think that Canaan, if there was a second incursion, he would have supplied daughters early on for the fallen angels to create the original giants after the flood, because that curse happens right on Ararat. And then Canaan is named after that curse. So sometime shortly after, and certainly by the time of Babel, I'm thinking those giants had to be created. I also think that the Canaanites, Hittites, and Sidonians are all hybrids as well. So I think they're going to be intermarrying as well with female giants, but we just don't get those listed in the Table of Nations. And so when you look at Phoenicia and Tyre, these are clearly kings that look at themselves as gods and take their genealogies and their names back to their celestial mafia godfathers.
And what are your thoughts on what's going on right now in Israel, where they moved into Syria
Yeah.
to take over Mount Hermon? And then you also have the thing where, what was it? It was the 5 areas of Israel that they never ever took back like they were supposed to, but these are the areas that are still contested to this day. And the the I guess you could say the spirits or even the Nephilim bloodlines that still hold sway over these physical locations that they have yet to be able to drive out Hamas and all these other ones.
It'll be interesting to see whether they actually succeed on that, because Damascus is a separate entity in the time of Armageddon, and it has a special destruction in that time frame. So it seems to be a bit independent, but it's also not part of the alliance group in the Gog War. So I think wherever this settles out, you're likely to see an alliance in the Middle East that Israel is going to be working with for a period of time, but there's going to be wars. So I'm not sure exactly how that's going to play out, but we do know Damascus is going to have this significant destruction, but it's, it's in the last 3.5 years. So, and it doesn't seem to play a larger role. So I think they're going to have an influence there. I don't know whether or not they're going to get all of Syria or not, or in control of Mount Hermon. I'm not convinced the polytheists will permit that at this point in time.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't think that's going to happen.
Yeah.
But it is rather interesting, nevertheless.
It is. And if you look at, I think it's Psalms 83, when it's talking about David and this conspiracy of all of these giants to wipe Israel from the face of the earth, which is the extension of that oath taken in the time of the Exodus by originally the Amalekites and then taken up by all these different giant nations in the giant wars there. You have um, Tyr that's listed, and you also have Philistine that's listed. Well, Tyr is Lebanon today, where Hezbollah is in control of, and they're sworn to destroy Israel from the face of the earth. And Gaza is the place of the Philistines, which is also in their constitution trying to destroy Israel from the face of the earth. I think this blood covenant is still in place. So
And when you say Tyre, you're talking about Tyre,
yeah,
the
city of
location that
Tyr,
right,
Phoenicia. Yeah,
yeah, right over there next to Sidon and Phoenicia
yeah.
and all that. Yeah,
Yeah, no, it's
exactly.
such an important city. I mean, you had, like Mount Hermon, and the two major cities of Bashan were, Ashtaroth and Edrei, and then right in the middle was Ugarit.
But it's just interesting, these geographical locations. It's
Yeah.
like what took place in the past that still makes that such a predominant important.
Well, I mean, certainly with Mount Hermon, that's where the oath to create the giants were. That is the portal where Baal goes back and forth to watch over his domains, both in another dimension in the Hades and Sheol and on the earth. You know, the um, and they have a specific cave, named after that. So the gateway to Hades. You have the Pan Temple there. Uh, and you have, the Golan Heights, which is the military secret high point of the land. You have Gilgal Raphaim on the Golan Heights, which is the wheel of the giants. And it is an area that has special significance to pretty much all of the occult religions around the world.
But you
If
also
you
have
were,
the serpent out there too. Remember, they just found that serpent that's only visible high up that you can see right up there next to the wheel of the giant that you're talking about.
yeah,
That
yeah,
was it Avi Lipkin or whatever it just came out
yep,
with.
yeah. I mean, that is part of what you would call the wheel circuit of, so it's a common thing in polytheism to have wheel like um, worship sites, and then specially located ones that went in a wheel that you would go around a pilgrimage every year and sort of worship at. And so Gilgal means wheel in Hebrew, and Raphaim, you could translate that as giant, healer, or a demonic spirit, but it's generally understood as the wheel of the giants. So this is a very important. We called that a circuit in terms of that pilgrimage. So I think you'll see more sites that are going to be listed that way as part of that wheel worship. And we get these wheel things around the world, like you get at Stonehenge. It's a very common sort of understanding. And again, in each of those countries, you have these areas where they would go throughout the year and worship at certain times of the year in relation to the eighth Sabbath. That's also located in a wheel.
What about the Reshat structure? Have you seen the stuff where they tie that in with Atlantis?
No, I have not done any research on that.
I have to send you some stuff on that. Jimmy from Bright Insight, he's done some amazing research into that. And like I say, he makes a very strong and compelling case because when you look at the satellite images, you can actually see where the land has been washed over for, hundreds of thousands of miles.
Yep. And where's that located?
That's over in Africa. And
In Africa.
yeah.
In on the west coast,
Yes.
north side.
Hmm.
So if you look at the records of the original Atlantean Empire, it has 10 different locations. That was one area of the Atlantean Empire, not the continent, but you would have similar architecture under the 10 kings that Poseidon created.
Hmm.
And so it would be, I think, certainly part of that empire.
And there's salt around the rings
Yeah.
that is still there and still visible, and you can see the structure from space.
Yeah. Well, and the Atlantean imagery of its circular nature, concentric rings, is similar to Gilgal Raphaim. It's a common imagery, which, makes sense if there was a common, maybe different branches or sects, but a common pantheon. And as you were mentioning that you have those nine um, gods that saw over the same religion, different vernacular names for different gods all around the world in 9 different civilizations, it would make sense that the imagery would be the same, like pyramids as well, would be part of that infrastructure and architecture that they would have been building all around the world. And the same types of masonry which we see all around the world. And who knows what's going on in some of those underwater cities in terms of how that connects in. Are those part of the antediluvian cities, or is that even older? Hard to know. And what was the technology that went in there? But I would expect anything that you find in where Plato had laid out where Atlantis was, you would find architecture that would reflect a similarity to the Atlantean imagery.
Yeah. Well,
How
is
you,
that
how you guys doing on time? You good with that? You guys gave a lot and it was amazing. I appreciate you guys coming on very much. And I'll just want to do a screen share really quick of their websites that you can go to here. Yeah, thank you guys so much for coming on. It was such an honor and a privilege to have you guys on here. And
I
here we
always
go.
enjoy coming on and talking with Gary.
It's always fun. We should do it more often.
We should.
Hey, you guys are welcome here anytime for that space. And this is Gen 6, the number 6 conspiracy.com. This is where you can go to Gary's site. You can get both of the books here. You can get them on Amazon as well. Like you said, he just came out with the audio version of book number 2 today. Or yeah, today, right, Gary?
Yep. Yep. Today,
Nice.
yesterday it came out. And so on the website, on the buy now page, you've got links to go over to amazon.com, amazon.ca, barnesandnoble.com, also links to get the Kindle version from Amazon as well. And with the next update that I'm going to put in place now that the audio is, I'm going to have audio links to go right to the audio page on Amazon as well. Also through iTunes is the distribution with ACX on that. And also I'll put up links to, if I can, if there's space on the pages, I want to get links to amazon.uk, amazon.au, and a few other locations around the world. So and there's the buy page has been revamped as well, so you can get discounts for buying multiple books of each one. And then there's a third page on there now that went up about a week or so ago, where you can bundle the 2 books, and as you buy more books, you get a bigger discount.
Right on. Thank you, Gary. And then I heard you talking about a book 4. When's book 3 coming?
Well, I'm about 10 chapters into it, and I had to put it aside over the last 6 or 7 months because of all the things coming out with book 1, or I mean with book 2, and the audible versions that I had to be part of as well. So, and all the shows I was doing to promote book 2. So I'm hoping next year I can spend more time on it, but it's going to be at least 2 years, I think, because even when I have the product ready, it's about a year to get it published.
Sure. Yeah. No,
Yeah, and I told him about when you did the first one. It was almost 1,600 pages, and they were like, "Oh no, you're gonna have to trim this down. This is way too much." And then I was
Yeah.
like, even with 800 pages, he still had 200 pages of references. So it's like
that's
Gary don't play.
amazing.
And you see, I always get Gary to spill his secrets. See, he just mentioned he's going to do 4 books. So
That's great. Yeah, and head on over to you can go to YouTube, subscribe to Chad's channel there. It's Truth Seekers Research. He has a lot of great research here. A ton of videos, then the trailer also to his film, and you can get that over here at Vimeo, and it's Skinwalkers and Stranger Things of the Unseen Realm. And support these guys' work. We're learning stuff that you wouldn't learn any other way than doing the hard work and the research. And it's kind of cheating for me because I get to listen to you guys and other people too. So we appreciate you guys so much. Thank you so much for coming on, Get Closer, and you guys are both welcome back anytime. God bless y'all.
The UFO phenomenon, as studied by my colleagues and myself, bespeaks the action of some form of intelligence.
Good evening. Tonight we go after a fantastic story. The story that flying saucers from other worlds are visiting our planet. Why will the United States government withhold information from United States citizens? For what reason?
The Air Force is simply treating the American people like children. They don't trust them with the facts.
We've had people actually shut down a piece of a program on the basis that American taxpayer dollars should not be spent on pursuing demonic technology.
Speaking of cults, Al, weren't you in Scientology?
Oh, years back, I checked into it because at that time we were doing, setting up a remote viewing program. We were checking into everything. Silver mind control, Scientology, whatever. I thought some of the techniques were definitely of value, but I disconnected from them in the mid-70s.
I don't know. Bob read something really strange and disturbing in the briefings that we have no place to put it, that they referred to human beings as containers.
Well, the Air Force has the best brains in the country working on it. General Nate Twining, the Air Force Chief of Staff, says that if there are saucers from Mars or Jupiter or some far-off planet, and that there is a people and a world that far ahead of us, he doesn't believe we even have to worry about it.
There are things flying around up there that we haven't fully identified yet.
Roswell's a very interesting place with a lot of people that would like to know what's going on.
There's footage and records of objects in the skies that we don't know exactly what they are.
We saw a bright light appear in the distant western skies. We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The official Air Force reply has long been that there is no cover-up, no.
We have received and analyzed between 1 and 2,000 reports. There have been a certain percentage that have been made by credible observers of relatively incredible things.
This is David Brinkley in the radar room at Washington National Airport. On these radar screens last Saturday, they saw something strange and unusual and at the moment unexplainable. It was not an airplane, it was not a cloud, nobody knows what it was.
President Reagan suddenly said to me, "What would you do if the United States were attacked by someone from outer space? Would you help us?" I said, "No doubt about it." He said, "We too." So that's interesting.
Based off of the information that you've been privy to, is there any indication that these UAPs are interested in our nuclear technology and capabilities?
Yes. And by external observation, sure, that could be a fair assessment, yeah. Yes.
I called Curtis LeMay and I said, "General, I know we have a room at Wright-Patterson where you put all this secret stuff. Can I go in there?" I've never heard him get mad, but he got madder than hell at me, cussed me out, said, "Don't ever ask me that question."
In the last couple of years, have you had incidences that have caused you to be in fear for your life for addressing these issues?
Yes, personally.
Oh, yes, we discussed it with every conference that we had with the military, and they never were able to make me a concrete report on it. There's always things like that going on, flying saucers.
People keeping this information secret at the Pentagon believe the information is so terrifying to the public that it would be contrary to the national interest to reveal it. I mean, obviously.
In fact, I had one, I remember the conversation very well. This is a person I respected tremendously, very, very senior person. He's told me, he said, "Lou, I want you to stop doing this." I said, "Okay, sir, I certainly can, but may I ask why?" And he says, "Well, we already know what it is." Now, at that moment, I honestly thought maybe it was our own technology. I was running up against some super uber secret SAP, and they were telling me to stop. And I said, "Okay, sir, so it's ours?" And he said, "No, that's not what I'm saying." And he said, he asked me point blank, "Have you read your Bible lately?" And I wasn't quite sure where he was going with that. And I said, "Well, sir, I think I know what it says. Where are you going with this?" And he said, "Well, then you would know that these things are demonic and we should not be pursuing them."
There was programming bases. They use military bases because they won't have any interference when they have someone on a military base. And a lot of my programming took place on military bases. I would like to talk about the fact that there are rituals done at the military bases also, and that rituals are not a cover. The people that do the mind control are involved, and rituals are very much a part of how they do things. For example, naval intelligence members or people that are in naval intelligence are usually very involved with Ordo Templi Orientis. And that doesn't mean that everyone in naval intelligence is involved in that. But naval intelligence is responsible for a lot of overseeing of ritual activity in this country. And they are responsible for a lot of this going on. There are other organizations, other agencies involved, but naval intelligence is very involved.